Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Megan McGowan-Crouch. I'm the city manager. Been in this role since February of 2021, so this is my first biennial budget, but I've been sitting as a staff member for the previous 25 years. And I have sat in every budgeting process we've had since then. We used to cram into what is now a planning conference room in Old City Hall, all the staff and the council and the public. That was a good time. And so we've grown a little bit. We've moved some rooms. We do have some council members absent. Councilman Parsons is out of the country on a long-planned family trip, and it was expected that he wouldn't be able to be here. Councilman Dawson was not able to attend on a last-minute issue, and so those two will not be here, and we're expected not to be here, and we'll have some other council members trickling in. So just a few housekeeping things as we kind of kick this off. I want to let everybody know, for the council, we've got snacks for you. Allison can get you something to drink. We've got water and soft drinks. We'll take some breaks along the way. You know, I expect to go in the 2 to 3 hour range today. We'll see what questions that you have. Then I'll go over what we're going through today. We are recording everything. Cynthia's videoing this. We will post it on our website tomorrow once it is captioned, but we are not live streaming right now because it is not captioned. The budget documents and other things that go with this will be available tomorrow on our website. They are not currently posted, and that goes for presentations, and all of that will be posted when the video is posted, and we'll make those available to you tomorrow. We have to recompile and PDF and do a lot of things to the presentation, so we'll be doing that. Also, just a note for the council in the back of your mind, as I've indicated on upcoming agenda items, the budget ordinance will be first reading next Tuesday. I fully expect on June 21st for unanimous consent to be denied, which would put budget adoption consideration really to July 5th at the earliest. So that is pretty common with city councils, is, you know, you often do not adopt it on first reading to give more time to yourselves and the public, and that's absolutely fine and expected, and we built the schedule expecting that. The only monkey wrench in that is if you guys decide you're not meeting on July 5th. Right now we're expecting that. I haven't heard from any of you that that is an issue for a quorum or otherwise. I'm keeping the meeting on July 5th unless some of you tell me otherwise. Obviously Independence Day is a holiday on the 4th, but on the 5th we plan to meet.
Yeah. If we know we're going to have unanimous consent tonight, why don't we just postpone to start with, so we, in the event that we do need the second reading.
Well, it'll automatically come, and if you guys decided to postpone it further from there, first reading is done. That's the why. So then from there, if majority of you want to do whichever you can. A couple of other quick things. You guys have your binders in front of you. A couple of just things to help you out as we're going along the way. You've got on the inside left cover, you've got a description of the budgetary process and system. What you're seeing in this is not the full document, and what the numbers are all in here. What's missing are the Government Finance Officers Association. There's a lot of text and extra things in appendix that go along. That's not with this yet. It's not germane to anything you present. It's extra information that we're required to win an award with. You've got the meat of the budget is in your tabbed information. And in the back, you also have, these are memos from both the Parks and Rec Advisory Board with their priorities, and the Auburn Public Library Advisory Board with what they had to say. We talked a little bit in the spring about their priorities with their projects and where those boards were coming. So that's stuff for you to read, a little bit of homework, and we'll weave that in. The other packet that's sitting in front of you is all outside agency requests. All their information is here. At this time, and I'll talk about it a little more in a minute, in what is proposed from me, it is level funded. And there have been 2 new agencies to request. I Am My Brother's Keeper, as well as AO Discover, which is a children's interactive museum. But I am proposing at this time, unless the council chooses otherwise, I'm proposing level funding for the organizations that you're already funding, and no change to that. If the council desires to make a change in any direction, that'll be up to you from there. And so that's traditionally what staff has done, is proposed level funding, and that's what I'm choosing to do. But I'll talk about that more in a minute. But that just wanted to give you with your binders what's going on. The last time we did a biennial budget, we were on Zoom with you, with these delivered to your homes and trying to scramble a little bit. We were at the height of the pandemic. We're going to give you page numbers along the way. I'll remind staff members if they don't to give you page numbers so that you can keep up with where we are and look in your book if you want to look at full numbers or more information or make notes accordingly. And so what I want to talk about next is a little bit about our schedule. Today, I'm just going to give you a grand overview. I have a budget message. I'll get to the page number of that in a minute. Right at the front of your document, our Finance Director, Allison Edge, great, you're not Fraser, Fraser's in the back. Allison Edge is going to give you an overall picture of revenue. We're going to talk a lot about revenue. I want to also kind of point out to you what's important to me is this staff is very, very conservative when it comes to the budget, including the potential for recession. And we have budgeted that way. We're not, this city is long been in both management and council very fiscally conservative, and we have remained in that camp of while we want to be good stewards of the taxpayer's dollar and not be sitting on too much money, we also don't want to over budget and overspend or get the perception of overspending and we hit a recession. I can tell you, while we already budgeted conservative in 20, if you'll recall, we tightened our belt, dropped a lot of capital projects and did other things until we figured out what the economy was doing. This budget has been built understanding that the experts are all over the board on recession and it could go in any which direction. And so we feel that we took the very conservative, safest route along the way. So just know that's kind of an overreaching theme. So if you want to get into a little bit more here, well, we'll run through capital projects, capital outlay. The executive directors of the business units will do that. And we're only doing 2 departmental presentations today. We'll take some breaks along the way and have plenty of time for questions. This isn't just a time for us to talk at you or to educate you. It is, if you've got a question, go ahead and interject. I would like to, and you can hold them, you can do whatever, but I've got, every department head is here, a lot of their deputy directors or assistant directors, all key staff members are here, and we are ready and able to answer your questions. Also happy to get them an email. You can call me, we can meet another time. We want to be sure we get any information you need taken care of. To get to it, I'm going to go a little backwards for my slide. First, I want to thank my buddy. I already called Allison Edge the wrong person, so I like to do that. We have a lot of Allisons that are key leaders in our city. So she, of course, is our finance director and treasurer, and she's very important. And this is Erica, who I love to forget her last name, Erica Sprouse, and she's our assistant finance director and treasurer, as well as Stephen Krantz. He's our budget and strategic planning manager. And behind him, seated, is Lauren Lett. She can raise her hand. Lauren's fairly new to our staff. And then Heidi Lowry, she's sitting behind me, our principal financial analyst. And then Michelle Wall, she's our HR business partner manager. And then Valerie Baker's not here. She moved from city manager's office to finance. I have Kristen sitting at the table because she gets to answer a lot of human resources questions, so should they come up. So to go back to the process, which is in the inside left pocket of your binder, just a little bit of background. The city's long been doing biennial budgets. The importance of a biennial budget has to do with much goes into this process. This staff got started really with the citizen survey, which runs from early winter as we formulated into late winter as it goes to citizens, and it starts there. In our departments, we sped up the process this year because we have an election coming and we want to move the budget forward to be sure that we have your time and attention at this time focused here. That really started in March with departments beginning to look at submitting things, and then a lot of you couldn't get great a hold of me for a whole week in May, where we met with every department about everything that they put in the budget. The budget team met regularly. I mean, with the executive directors. A lot goes on in formulation of this, kind of culminating with your input on some things, and your input that I received, and we're going to talk about in a minute, played a huge role in how I prioritized some things that I placed in the budget and the reasoning why. And so, and here we are at work sessions, and I already mentioned first reading. So we're going to get in, take a quick look and dive. This starts on page 24 of the citizens and city council priorities. So if you'll remember, you saw this during the citizen survey. This is what the citizens thought our major categories of city services we should put the most emphasis on. Flow and management of traffic and maintaining our infrastructure, of course, always our schools, and then a lot having to do with quality of parks and recreation, and then of course public safety and so on. You'll kind of see how that weaves into what your priorities are. This is how you came down on certain things. To explain to everybody, I put 12 different questions in the priorities that you looked at, and this is based on a number of factors. What the citizen survey was saying, things that are in current strategic plans that we expect to fund, regular maintenance of infrastructure, and what I consider to be long-time considerations for the council or hot-button issues I've heard from you on that you're telling me your constituents are saying. So school funding ranked as your overall #1 priority. You rank things from 1 to 12. So the lowest number in the average column is the highest ranking of the council across the board. Again, I want to remind everybody that Councilman Parsons is out of the country when this was sent on a vacation and not able to submit, and also that the Ward 4 position is vacant, so therefore we only have 7 of the 9 members submitting on this. So you rank flow of traffic and congestion management second. That's really relatively new in the highest of rankings of the council, not new in the citizen survey. It's long been a priority of our citizens. And then followed by new community centers with gymnasiums and pools, outdoor athletic facilities, etc. I'm going to go to the next page. It kind of categorizes them. These are the top 4, the second 4, and these are not the bottom 4. It's just the bottom third of what you were doing. And what I mean is these are all high priorities of you. This is the order in which you rank them for me, which helps me with certain things. We already talked about funding for outside agencies, and a lot of you rank that as one of your lowest priorities of top priorities of the council, and I understand why that is. Going through the Boykin Donahue campus improvements and other things, you're going to see much about all of these topics as we roll into the capital improvement plan, and there are some probably unexpected changes to how I'm proposing to fund Boykin. The Boykin gym right now is out, and the Lake Wilmore gym is in. Couldn't do both of them. That's not affordable. It's an extra $20 million hit to do both of them. We don't have it, not right now. So you'll see some of that, and we'll get to those priorities, but that's all coming, and the executive directors will be presenting that, but there may be some changes that you guys decide that you want based on what I'm proposing in the meat of those projects. So speaking of Boykin, this is how you rank the things there as your priority. And 1 was the gym, 2 library, 3 splash pad, and 4 the cultural center. You were not given the dollar amounts that they had. You didn't know that, and I didn't want you to know that. I wanted to know what you thought. This also weaves, when we get to priorities, the Parks and Rec Advisory Board gives very succinct priorities from where they're coming from in a memo in your pocket. One of the things that we need right now are multi-purpose fields. We're woefully short for baseball, softball, flag football, lacrosse, etc. And so part of what bumped the Boykin gym was that need to do multi-purpose fields, so that we're touching major priorities across the board. Both we're getting a gymnasium at Lake Wilmore if you approve that, and then we're also getting some multi-purpose fields. And so those are some reasons. We'll get into the CIP, we can talk through that, but trying to balance all the needs and take boxes somewhere in the city to deliver those services or facilities somewhere. Do you have any questions about the priorities before I move on?
Megan, I was going to mention, when the idea of the cultural center was first brought forward, the concept was it to be a community build, like a habitat house, like Hickory Dickory Park. Maybe not totally, but a lot of the heavy lifting would be done by members of our community or companies within our community who wanted to give up their time and their talents. My expectation was never, and this is just I'm personally saying, my expectation was never that the city was going to totally do this project, fund it, build it, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Obviously, the hope and the expectation was that the city would bequeath a piece of dirt that this would be built on, and maybe participate in helping with some infrastructure needs, whether it's parking lot or whatever. But the building that was going to be done with our community. So I would still hope that could be done on some level and revisited as we approach the opportunity to do this with that property becoming available in the future. And the expectation might be that this will be such a big hit to our budget. I know compared to
It's
a lot
about a
of other things, this is.
yeah, it's $1.5 million in right now. We'll talk about that. You know, we're gonna use just a little bit of, called rescue plan money, to offset just a little bit of that, but it was in the $15,000 realm. Not a big offset of that piece of it. You guys can also, you know, marinate on that. The CIP, why we're not digging into the capital improvement plan right now, on page 147 is where you would find right now what I'm referring to with Boykin. We'll get in, like I said, into a lot more detail, but I'm letting you know with your priorities already from my lens, because my staff is going to be presenting the depth of those projects from where I'm coming from, based on what you've signaled, what the community is saying, and the need, and the boards and commissions you rely on to advise you, trying to spread needs across different sports. I mean, my predecessors have done a wonderful job being city manager and leading this city, but also we made some tough decisions about the 5 mil tax fund, which is now dedicated to the schools, which has left us behind on some parks and recreation projects. So what I've attempted to do is tick a number of boxes to address a number of needs that we have in the community, to provide a little bit of something for everyone. And as you know, nothing's changed about Lake Wilmore and a pool. I think Councilman Griswold had a comment, not all your raw comments end up on the next page, but just saying a pool is a priority for you in that project is kind of how I read that, you know, to do that and tick that box. You have a group in the community that's been asking for a pool, and that will be one that can be covered. It can also be removed, the cover can be removed and heated. It was ticking that box of providing based on a loss of the Health Plus Fitness facility. And so there's a lot of moving parts, and we're happy to discuss all of that with you and the why. But I can't be clear enough. If you guys decide you want to change something around as a group and the majority of you want to do that, we will make the adjustments. I mean, this is a recommendation from me based on all that I know.
I want to ask a question too. Did I just hear you say, maybe I misunderstood what you said, that there was 2 new community centers, I noticed on number 3, and what did you say about Boykin? It's not gonna.
Right now, the gymnasium, and we'll talk about it later, the capital project is not included in this budget. It's a $20 to $22 million expense in the budget, and we cannot afford everything at Boykin and to do Lake Wilmore. Lake Wilmore is ready to bid right now, and the #1 priority of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board is to deliver gymnasium space. That project can get out to bid and under construction in '23. Boykin cannot get under construction until sometime in fiscal '24. And so Lake Wilmore is ready today to go. We held that because of COVID. It actually got removed completely from the budget. It was ready, may have been out to bid. Becky, was it out to bid, or Allison?
No.
No, but it was close to going out to bid. And that's one of the projects that was held. So we'll talk about that a little more later. I'm signaling to you before the staff gets into the capital stack. They're going over what I approved to recommend to you. So we can talk more in depth about Boykin when we get to that project. But we cannot afford both projects, and not in their entirety. So we have to talk through. Not when Allison will talk a lot about where we stand with debt and other things in our revenue picture. And remember, think back to being conservative. I mean, I'm not trying to steal her thunder, but we're projecting a 2% increase in revenue for good reason. We don't know what a recession can do if it hits. And it's, in my professional opinion, far better to be conservative, because we can always adjust the budget and spend more, and we can tighten our belt and spend less, but I don't want to signal that we're out there willy-nilly. That doesn't send a good financial message. All right, so here are some of your comments. Both Anders and Dawson had, just said, hey, what about public safety? I did not include that in your priorities because this council has signaled handily that public safety is a priority. So that's why I didn't put it in your priorities. I've not been indicated otherwise. Both Councilman Griswold and Councilwoman Taylor are very interested in some neighborhood sidewalk connections. Councilman Griswold had some specific areas in his ward where he's getting requests, and Cary Woods, some way to get to the Walmart neighborhood market area, and another way to get to the Publix area, basically. And then Councilwoman Taylor was interested in just Northwest Auburn in general, having more sidewalk connections. Councilwoman Taylor also wanted to see some neighborhood lighting, and then also some more city funding in conjunction with community development block grant funding to rehabilitate housing for seniors and disabled. And then she'd like to see school funding include some more mental health needs and programs. So, and then Councilman Griswold has said this from day one, that he's very interested in us changing the search engine on the city's website, so he'd like us to fund that somehow to make it more robust. Is that fair? You're saying that was a kind way of putting it, but yes. So those are in there, they're in your binders, same comments. A few other things for context is, it's no secret that we're growing, and I didn't put the 2021 estimate in here, I'm just sticking with the census 2020, but you know, we've grown a good bit since 2010, 42.6%. I lead a city as city manager, it's a little different than it was even 10 years ago. And you as a council lead a city that is very different and changing in many ways, and we manage that very carefully. But I want to remind you, in 1980, right before we started the council manager form of government, we had 27.3 square miles of city limits. Now we have 62 square miles. The people in this room work very hard to maintain, manage, and generate an excellent quality of life for our citizens, and that's what they expect, and we want to deliver on that. Just in the last 2 fiscal years, in fiscal 20 and 21, because 22 is not complete, 803 acres were annexed. We created 1,500 lots. We permitted 1,426 single-family homes and 85 commercial units. And it goes without saying that we've had accelerated growth in the northwestern quadrant of the city, along North Donahue Farmville Road and Richland Road. This shows, and you can't see it very well, this is just something, we actually use this for commercial development. Those rooftops help drive commercial development. Why do you think there are changes at North Donahue and Wilbin Parkway? Why are new investments being made there? Because of all the rooftops in that area. You're going to see more in the Donahue Farmville area over time. This is where the growth is, and this is where the services are going to go. So that says in this top left corner, which is a little bit hard to read, in that area right now there's 4,401 homes kind of showing in these highlighted areas on the map. But total planned homes is another 3,198. And Councilwoman Whitten will tell you that's Ward 3. Welcome to it. Councilman Griswold had a good bit of that, and that growth factor in that area is 133% increase. You'll see. All right there, Beth? Yeah, you got it. Yeah. Ward 3's got it going on over there. So much is happening in this quadrant, so you're going to see some things in the budget, and I'll remind you, things like the Donahue Farmville traffic signal are going in this fiscal year. That's not showing up here because that's already in progress. You'll see in latter years, not in the current biennium, you'll see in your capital improvement plan, page 147, and later you'll see the old Donahue widening stuff starts appearing in the 6-year CIP. All of that stuff starts appearing to address that. And remember, we have a number of development agreements in place that are paying toward improvements on Donahue and Farmville. They're not going to fund them up front, I can tell you that right now. It's not, we're going to end up funding it up front, but we'll get some payback to that fund over time, reimbursement for the improvements that we make. So this is just shaping, the budget is shaped heavily by this and our ability to address it. And you're going to see things as I get into new positions, we are having to do some things to address that level of growth. So kind of where do we stand in a broad overview? Yeah, Bucky Beaver had to say hello today, ours, you know. This is going to generate a lot of revenue for us to help pay for that. But at the end of the day, in our departmental expenditures, which, you know, we fancy ways in the general fund, you know, we've got a $140 million budget we're proposing. That's a large budget in the general fund, the largest in my tenure at the city. And we'll talk bottom line on that in a minute. But page 36 reflects an 8.56% increase in expenditures in 23, 5% of which is personal services, which in English is salaries and benefits. And I'll get to some of that and the why in just a minute. So really, we held the line, we level funded all of that minus salaries and benefits in the past biennium. So if you really look at it, it's 3.56% if you're looking at it compared to how we budgeted in the last biennial budget. Correct, Nelson? I have her look at me periodically, so she can give me the stink eye. And the same in FY24, it's a 4.75% increase, but really it's only a little over 1% because most of which is personnel, we call it personal services again. And I'm just pointing flat out to you, I mean, this is a very transparent process, so I'm trying to hit the highlights so you guys, if you have questions down the road, can figure out where it's coming from. Our by and large, our departments did not ask for big increases. Fuel and utilities would be a normal increase as we've seen inflation. So a lot of that is in that. And the other thing is a lot of us missed training opportunities. Our staff is very educated and certified, and they have to maintain a lot of that, and they have done a lot of virtual conferences ad nauseum, and now they're starting to travel again. And we have expanded some staff members, and so we're catching up on some of that. And one of the big things is I felt strongly that based on the public safety department split we did in creating a police department and a fire department, that did not balance their training budgets very well. So I also asked the chief of police, he did not ask, I asked Cedric if we could add a little more training budget so that he had a little more room on a per officer basis to do a few more things. And so that was a much welcome increase in there. Outside agencies, they are on page 100. Like I said, those are level funded with the exception of those tied to a tax-driven formula or other contractual agreement. The airport is one of those. Remind me, Erica. AO Tourism, we have a taxing formula with a lodging tax that goes to them. Am I missing one? Okay. And so then I said before, 2 new agencies requested funding. It's I Am My Brother's Keeper, IMBK, and AO Discover, the Children's Hands-On Science Center. Again, I did not recommend any increase in funding. Some of the agencies asked for that. I did not recommend anything different. We just level funded minus our contractual obligations. You'll see capital projects start on page 145 and capital outlay, which means our big equipment, on page 140. So kind of rolling into some other things. I've always been taught that adding new positions is, can be nails on a chalkboard for a city council and for a city manager. What I can say is with our growth, it's necessary. Our budget can afford it. And I'm adding 14 new positions as I recommend total over the biennium, 9 of which will be in fiscal 23. A GIS coordinator sounds funny to you, but everything we do with mapping and so on depends on it. And we also have a lot of programs that touch GIS, even though Councilman Griswold was mentioning earlier, I had trouble finding some redistricting stuff if you just searched it. On that whole redistricting site we use is driven through our GIS group, and it services us internally and makes our staff more efficient. We've got to add a staff member in that realm to also get our deputy IT director doing some other things. I have sat down and met with a number of developers and civil engineers. There used to be a notion years ago, well, you guys have a lot of engineers at the city. Now our development permitting is so high, and we produced, since we started the DRT process, development review team, we've done over 1,000 projects, and there's one civil engineer that is in charge of that whole process. And what we're finding is we're getting a little more slowed down than we would like to on plan review and responses to citizens. We have one person managing the majority of that. So I'm recommending adding a civil engineer to that. I've also checked with some of my engineering friends that submit a lot of projects saying I don't want to hear it from you. If I'm going to add somebody, do you get it? And the answer is yes. Our volume of projects is so high, and you've seen the planning commission agendas and other things. This person's mainly focused on development review to help the other person. Both in 23 and 24, I'm adding a maintenance worker for public works, and that in English means they're going to be working on stormwater maintenance, correct, Dan? And then we'll be working a right-of-way maintenance worker. We, as you saw the city limits grow, we have a lot more right-of-way to mow, maintain, and cut back. So one of the things I hear from you guys a lot is, why don't you do more edging? Why don't you cut more bushes back? Why don't you do this in the right-of-way? We need to do it more often. The addition of these folks, which have very minimal impact to the budget and on equipment, makes a huge difference in our ability to put crews together to do that even better. I believe we spend a lot of time mowing our major gateways and things like when we were hosting the baseball regional, we went out and did extra work. We did extra work today trying to get some stuff ready for Auburn Bank's opening. We're very sensitive to things going on in town, but our citizens, and I believe the city council, expect our major corridors to look good, and they expect our neighborhoods to look good and what the city's responsible for. So I'm recommending those positions. A programming specialist with the library, we have several people doing that right now that are pushed to the max. Our programs are continuing and we could be doing more. Tyler Witten, remind me, we haven't added a staff member to the library in how long?
2008.
It's been a while. So we're dealing with the same staff since 2008. And that's why I'm willing to recommend this. Our programming folks could be doing more. You're actually going to see something in our capital stack that is a van that is going to be going out and doing more outreach as we begin to change around some of the ways that we do business and service our citizens. The next is, in tandem with the engineer, we need another planner and planning services. Our volume of cases and our ability to get to some long-range plans, and I don't even mean for staff to do them, but for staff to manage consultants to do them. We have had a hard time keeping planners. I happen to be somebody who was hired here as a planner many years ago. You couldn't keep me either because I elevated on out of the department. And so that happens, but we have the case volume, the citizens' requests, and some things we want to get to that are very important that can generate. We're hearing from a lot of folks, like, I would do a better development if you had X, Y, Z in your ordinance. Well, okay, we need to add it to the ordinance, but I need staff capacity to do that. Then the other thing is the city has grown. Katrina, how long has it been since Environmental Services has added anybody in the collection realm?
Late 90s.
Late 90s, we've been operating with the same staff, and as technology's improved, we've gone from multiple people inside the truck and outside the truck to one operator doing it all. But our city limits, you saw how much they've changed. So we're adding 2 recycling collectors and 1 solid waste enforcement officer. I hear from a lot of council members, I'm tired of so-and-so's garbage cans being up down Glen Avenue and they're not putting it away. There's stuff all over the road. There's whatever. This person, we have 1 enforcement person covering the entirety of 62 square miles. This would be a second one. This is an enterprise fund, and that's paid for and funded by user fees, not the general fund directly. So it is affordable in that, correct? So, and then in 24, our information technology folks love the fact that our staff wants to do all these great, wonderful things. But every time we want to do more software things, we kind of unilaterally need more capacity in our IT department to service ourselves. So we talked about the police added the Axon body cameras and whole system that does many great and wonderful things. It about takes 1 person for what they're doing to service public safety needs, as it's our largest department. So we're asking in 24 to add that, and we will likely move toward somebody that's a little bit assigned to public safety alone, just because of the volume of things that they're using. You're going to hear later from Paul Register about some newer crime scene technology they're using and so on, and there's a lot of maintenance that goes into this, even down to cell phones and laptops. So we'll talk through that. Engineering services, we're needing to add an inspector. What do inspectors in engineering do versus inspection services? Our engineering inspectors inspect every road being built in Auburn, every curb, gutter, storm drains going in, a lot of things on the sewer and water connections in connection with water resource management. And so as infrastructure, and you saw that being built in Northwest Auburn, we've got to add capacity to inspect it. Why do we inspect it? Because we end up owning it. They inspect everything the city owns. They're our quality control to make sure as we take this infrastructure on that it meets our standards. So as you can see, we grow, and then we will be adding another fleet mechanic. We're building a brand new facility. We don't have room for a fleet mechanic now. The reason that's coming on in 24, we need the fleet mechanic now. We don't have anywhere for them to work. Accurate, Katrina? So in the new facility, there will be space for them to work, which gets our equipment, when it breaks down, which happens frequently, back on the road sooner if we have more capacity to work on it. A few other things that are unusual this year. In fiscal 23, I've got 7 Parks and Recreation maintenance workers that are what we call temporary to full-time. Kristen, do you want to explain what that means?
So your temporary worker, while they may work some full-time hours, is one that is not permanent. So they're seasonal. And so as time has gone on and we've grown, as Megan has referenced, they're working more and more hours. But the main difference is temporary do not get benefits, full-time do.
So we're converting 7 positions in our Parks and Recreation Department to that. They are working pretty close to year-round right now, Becky? Yes. And so the other thing is, and I'll get help from a few people on this, you know we have a very excellent student firefighter program, and it's been a mainstay of our ability to provide quality fire services, and even one of our own councilmen came from that program at one point in time. But as we've grown, we're going to keep the student firefighter program. It's very important to us. But we need to convert 9 student firefighter positions a year to a full-time firefighter or career firefighter. This allows us to eliminate something we call the day shift. We're able to staff our shifts better with consistency. There is a hit to the budget. It appears, when you look at it just straight up, about $175,000 a year, but that doesn't include, as we bring student firefighters in, we're constantly training them. And we train really great firefighters who work all over the southeastern United States because they can't have a career here, because we don't have enough career positions. So we have a good savings in terms of our training, but this provides stability and actually even advanced training opportunities where we have, you wouldn't think we have swift water rescue people, we do. We have storms, we have other things that happen, we do have some creeks, not major rivers, but we can train more people. It gives our career folks a chance to get some other training. The fire chief can speak to this a little more, or Kristen if you have questions, but you'll see this biennium and you'll see it. We have more conversion to do in the next biennium, is that correct, or is this it? Do you remember?
3.
We have to do one more time in the next.
It's a total of 3, yes.
And so that's the same in fiscal 24, we're converting positions on over. And again, we'll be happy if you have further questions to talk deeper about that. And those, that's the fire station nearing completion. And so, but not there yet, we'll do that in July.
So Megan,
Yes,
27 positions over the next 3 years?
Yes.
Okay.
So you just won't, because it's not in the biennium, but I want to be very clear with you guys that this is something that's expected. This is something for many years we didn't feel the need to do it, and as we began to look at a number of challenges we have, it'll leave us with a total of 30 student firefighters. Is that correct, Paul or John Langford? Is that correct?
You'll go from 60 full-time and 59 temporary to 87 full-time and 30 temporary.
Yes.
And we'll stay at that.
Yeah, and we don't want to eliminate the student firefighter program. It's an excellent program. That's not it, but there are aspects of it that are becoming unsustainable for us as we grow. We're manning additional stations, and you're going to hear a little bit later, we're also acquiring a rescue truck, and we'll have them. I've talked to a lot of council members about that, just saying, what does that mean for fire? It's something as we grow is necessary, and we'll talk a little bit more. Paul will give you a lot more detail on that.
Megan,
Sir?
before you keep going, just on personnel, can you speak to the council about the city's philosophy about overall personnel cost, and how does that compare to the overall budget?
Yes, we keep personnel costs below 50% of the general fund budget. And hold on just a minute, because I'm not there in my slides, and I have to put my little warming glasses on. I can tell you what that number is. In fiscal 23, it's 37.74% of the budget, and in fiscal 24, 43.44%. And I'll bring that up later. So a lot of cities run in the 70+% range, Kristen and Allison, and we keep our employees lean so that we can invest the citizens' money in projects and operations and other things. Doesn't mean we're providing a lower quality service. We also believe we don't pay the highest in the state, but we pay well and we compensate our people for what they do. And that's why you see in those service awards, like you did at the last meeting, why we end up with longevity, because we take care of our people. And that's a priority. We're going to talk about that at the next slide.
So those percentages include these additions that you mentioned?
Absolutely, all of it.
I have one more question
Yes,
on
ma'am.
the firefighters. So with those 30 temporary positions at the end of the next 3 years, is that enough of a pipeline for future positions?
Chief Langford, do you want to talk about that a little bit, if you mind?
Enough of a pipeline for recruiting and certainly,
Okay.
yes, it would be.
Do you feel like that's gives you a tighter group to hire from, as opposed to 50, 60 some that might go out to other places that we're training?
Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
certainly.
Thank you.
Any more questions on that one? Yes, sir.
We talked a lot about firefighters here. We approved some additional police positions last time around. And where do we stand in terms of filling those, and are we having a lot of turnover these days?
Oh, you want to answer that, or you want Cedric too?
I'll let Chief Anderson speak.
Chief Anderson, did you hear the question?
I did, and we experience turnover, as a lot of agencies did throughout the country. We have done a wonderful job. The staff down in community services that are responsible for the hiring and onboarding of personnel In the last year, we saw our numbers go from just over 30 to now we're down into the upper teens, and we still have people in the queue. So we're doing a tremendous job of getting people onboarded. The thing that we made sure we were doing when we were onboarding personnel is we did not want to sacrifice our standards. We felt like the citizens deserve the best we could find and not just filling spots for the sake of filling them. So we're being very, very methodical in the way we do it, but we have sped up the process some. So we're on track, and I think that by year's end, we will probably be in single digits.
So how many vacancies are we trying to fill right now?
Right now, there's a number that you get at the end of the month from Michelle, and there's a number we're looking at right now, I think 18 positions that we still need to get filled.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's, if you want to look at police across the country and if you find anybody that has got all their positions filled, what I can say is some of that ebbs and flows through us. We made strides in that, but we do have, it's a very tough job that people do. We've done everything from adjust salaries to you name it, to we've sped up the hiring processes in the way that we're doing it. I think it's important, and the chief can speak to this, we can adequately cover our shifts. There is no question about that. And then some. A lot of these too, you've got fluctuation between our contract with the university and the city and how we staff things, and we've got the flexibility and we are able to cover. Generally speaking, no matter what we do, and this has been very hard, if you just, as the chief indicated, want to take everyone who applies, that we could do that, but we make sure our quality is always met, and that is one thing we will not compromise, is that we have quality individuals working for us. All right, so a few other things with personnel. I'm recommending a 3% cost of living adjustment for our staff in the fiscal 23 and fiscal 24. That's part of what you're seeing in those overall personnel expenses. It's been pretty standard for us. You can ask questions about inflation. We modeled this about, in the good times and the bad times, where does the 3% sit? There were times that we didn't have a lot of inflation and our employees were getting 3%. We modeled it way back. I don't remember how far, Stephen, if you remember how far back.
10 years.
Yeah, we went back 10 years, and our employees are still coming out to the good with the fluctuations in the economy with the 3%. So we're staying the course to make sure we're taking care of everybody, but not. If we tie it to any sort of index, it gets really strange. We actually took a very hard look at this in February and March. It was something that was important to me. And inflation is rising, but that's kind of where we stood. And like I said, our employees have also gotten a 3% cost of living when we've had no inflation, so we feel that it balances. On insurance premiums, this is a tougher one. You don't ever want to raise insurance premiums, but we've got to maintain a very competitive benefit packages, which we do, but our medical costs are rising at 8%. Our claims expenses are increasing. COVID played a little bit of a role, but also we have a large workforce. We have 600 full-time employees. Things happen to them and their families that are beyond the control of anybody and cannot be anticipated, and we're self-insured. So yeah, that costs a little bit, and that's okay. That's why we have this. So at the end of the day, we've got a potential to increase insurance costs for 5% a year for our employees each year. And I put a table in here. It's in my budget message and everything, and it's showing you, depending on your type of coverage, what you're paying right now, and what you will be paying. And I'll tell you that this isn't to compare us to Auburn University, but I'll be happy to provide to any of you the same chart for Auburn University. We're significantly lower. And this is a recruiting thing for us that is important. And we have a lot of employees that are married to folks that work at Auburn University, me included. And because we don't have kids, I'm on single coverage with the city, and my husband's on single coverage with the university. We actually charge a penalty to our employees, a little dollar penalty to keep people on their own specific insurance if they can. We want you to have family coverage. We have different options. It's not something I want to do, but it is necessary to do this, or the general fund, it subsidizes even more. I think what's important is, though, that we're also increasing the dollar amount that the city, and it's in my message, also contributes monthly to each employee's insurance. And Kristen, you remember those numbers?
We're going from $482 is what we contribute now per month per employee to the city doing $500. per month.
So the city's also upping its contribution to help balance out this 5%. You have any questions on this?
So what all does that include? Is that digital?
That is just medical.
Just medical. Okay. No, but they also have access to our,
Dental.
yeah, into our clinic, right? Okay.
Yeah, so a big benefit for our employees is they do not pay as long as they're insured with us, with a few exceptions, and we made some exceptions in COVID dealing with testing and other things. If they're on our insurance plan, they and their families, they go to our city clinic, you pay nothing when you go there. And ultimately what that means is not only are they often back at work sooner because they've gotten it taken care of, we don't have to go sit at urgent care. That's also encouraging them. There's no copay at this, and it actually saves us what we pay for a clinic per visit is less expensive than somebody going to urgent care, and our employee does not have to pay a copay. And so it's actually very helpful in keeping the workforce working and their families. And as we discussed before, we're moving the clinic out. It's actually in this building, and it's moving out to North Dean Road to provide better access. It's hard for families to come downtown on a football Friday with a sick child and fight all of that. So we're getting the clinic somewhere that's a little more accessible for families. All right, a few things of interest that will not show up easily in the budget. Rebranding. It is time. The start of the 2040 process brought that out in an all-fire hurry. We will be rebranding in the next biennium. In this fiscal year in 23, it's in the city manager's office budget. David's around $100,000. You want to just give a brief, you want to stand up real quick and just give a brief overview of what that's going to entail. You'll see a contract come to you, but this has been of interest to people.
I think branding, rebranding can have a lot of different scopes and scales. You can look at communities and economic development departments do them and chambers do them, but we're really talking about an organizational rebranding, kind of our visual identity. And our logo is very much based on education and just looking at the...
That's a lamp of knowledge for anybody who doesn't know what that is. Yay!
I've actually asked a lot of people about the logo, and it's not that they don't think it represents us, but you start by they don't know what it means. And then we're more than just that now. So really visual rebranding from logo to colors to fonts to just make all of our materials and website, just everything says City of Auburn.
Even down to this City Hall logo. When we moved into City Hall in 2000 or 2001, it was supposed to be commemorative for the first year that we were there. It's our letterhead, it's our business cards. What is our logo? What is our brand? I don't know. We got these welcome to Auburn signs. They say something different. And now we are doing wayfinding signage, and those hang together, and you're seeing those throughout. But still, everything slides in and out of those. If we change a logo or want to do something, they're very easy to replace and fairly inexpensive. So my tilt is that our logos may not represent us and who we are today in 2022 moving forward, and we're going to find that out. The welcome to Auburn signs, I'm not here to debate them. They're in horrible shape, and the reason that we don't do more to maintain, Dan would like to plant flowers, but some of them are dangerous for our employees to be that close to, and we may have to take some down in the coming years. We haven't replaced them. They're in a weird spot. They're whatever. And as we roll back to the 2040 process, hopefully eventually we'll talk through some of that. One other thing you're probably hearing, and you all got letters from our retirees that really, really want to know if we're going to fund a one-time bonus for them. I want to remind you, and Kristen's going to stop me if I'm off with this one, is unless the legislature allows us to do some sort of raise or bonus for the retirees, there is no such thing. You cannot give them a cost of living raise. There is no legal ability to do that, correct? So this is just a one-time longevity bonus for retirees, and that is for all of our retirees. That is split based on a formula, and Michelle and Kristen, I don't recall the formula. It's years of service plus quite a few things. It was actually in a letter that an advocacy group sent to you, and we're recommending that we fund that. Our retirees pay very careful attention. A lot of folks haven't received a raise. You remember how long it's been? This isn't a raise, it's just a one-time bonus. It's a one-time payout. It's been a lot of years.
I think we did one maybe, unless it was a bonus. We
Yeah,
did
they're
one,
all bonuses.
and
They've
our
not
first-
been an actual percentage increase.
sometime between 14 and 18.
So we're recommending that. and you'll periodically hear from some retirees. Moving on through, one of the things weaving into this budget that's very important is the American Rescue Plan Act. You've not seen a budget for our $16.5 million allocation. There's been a reason for that. We have been moving very methodically with this funding from the federal government to get final guidance, be sure what that guidance is, and be sure we're tracking on what we recommend to you very carefully. You'll see it throughout the budget called Coronavirus State Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, because that's the actual name. We call it the Rescue Plan or ARPA money, but it is related to coronavirus. So they can only be used in responses and recovery from COVID-19 for certain things. Replace lost public sector revenue, which for us means $10 million. We can take a full drawdown of $10 million to the general fund and do what we want with it. We're going to recommend that, but I'll tell you what we're going to spend it on in a minute. Respond to the far-reaching public health and negative economic impacts of the pandemic, provide premium pay for essential workers. We're not doing any of that. And invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. The state is doing much of that. We're fortunate we have broadband, and no, we can not necessarily invest it in the outlying areas of the city unless we prove a lot of things to people. And the city doesn't have its own broadband infrastructure. We rely on the private sector. So getting into this, I'm trying to distribute it and largely apply it to Northwest Auburn. So you'll see as we work through the capital plan that 10 million, almost 11 of it is going to the Boykin campus project. Why put it there? Well, if I don't put it there, we're doing the Boykin campus project, we're borrowing $11 million. Or spending cash $11 million to do things at Boykin. So we use the rescue plan money there. 3.3 million, and I can have the mayor explain further, is going to East Alabama Health, which is East Alabama Medical Center. A lot of people know it. They have a ton of coronavirus unreimbursed expenses, millions upon millions of dollars. They have asked all the cities in the region to help. They have definitely served the citizens of Auburn. I don't know, Mayor, if you have anything to add.
You covered it. We've had a number of meetings with the leadership in the hospital, and they've asked ourselves and Opelika to consider this, as well as Lee County. They've even asked, obviously they cover other counties, so City of Valley was there, Chambers County was there, when that was there.
Lee County, yeah.
To consider using ARPA money to help them. I would echo what the city manager said. Our hospital really stepped up and tried to protect our community as aggressively and appropriately as possible, and they took some financial hits for doing that.
And of that 3.3, as I get into anything other than the initial 10 million, has to meet the very strict parameters that I showed you on the previous page. Not only strict parameters, the city is on the hook for anything anybody does with this money. And so therefore, we have to monitor the agencies we give it to. So they have to meet all the federal criteria, and they have to demonstrate that to us, and we have to turn around and demonstrate that to the federal government. So you have to be sure when you're granting money to an agency that they can meet the criteria, period. You've also seen a lot of cities who jumped out there early, got their wrists slapped, and got in a lot of trouble in audit season for spending money on things they shouldn't. The city will not do that, period.
What page is this on?
Huh?
What page are we on?
It's on page 9. Sorry, it's
Oh,
in the
man.
corner.
Okay.
And that's just showing there. So then 1 million of it would go to the Martin Luther King Drive Streetscape water main improvements. So that's a project we'll be talking about later, and that helps fund that part of that project that needs to be done. And water mains are fully eligible, so we're recommending that there. Then we need to put, I've talked to you, you approved a design contract for heating and air conditioning in the Frank Brown, Boykin, and Dean Road gymnasiums. Yes, in 2022, we do have heating in them, but the air conditioning, we still do not have air conditioning in those buildings. Recirculating air and exchanging air is a definitely eligible expense, and this is something we need to do anyway, and benefits many people with cleaner air and exchange of air. Just a little bit of air conditioning in the Boykin Community Center. It's also very eligible because of the agencies that are served. And then I've got a $300,000 chunk that is unallocated at this time. We wanted to try to identify needs in the community, and we'll be holding some public hearings on this for unmet needs. So there's been a lot of money that has come through our block grant program, through the CARES Act, and that's done utility assistance, rental assistance. We've helped the food bank, we've done a lot of things. The only need we've identified at this time that is majorly unmet, and our police encounter this, a lot of our agencies do, is homelessness. And what we're going to be looking for, we can't fund, well, we can, but I do not recommend from a staff perspective that we fund 15 agencies for homelessness, because we've got to monitor every bit. Looking for 1 or 2 groups where we can make an impact on homelessness to fund it, but there may be some other need in the community we have yet to identify. So $300,000 is unallocated at this time for agencies that may identify needs that have not been met. If CARES funding has been utilized already at the agencies, they are not overly eligible for this. Is that correct, Stephen and Erica? And so we also have to be very careful. If you receive CARES Act, we can't turn around and give you this funding for the same thing. We've got to be very careful and diligent in how we monitor that. The other key thing is, and one of the reasons for the Boykin campus, funds must be encumbered by the end of calendar year 2024, which that's really the first 3 months of fiscal 25 for us, and spent by the end of calendar year 2026. And if we don't do that, then we will lose the funds. Gone. And so that's where we stand. We can have much more robust discussion when you see the whole capital plan about it.
So those, majority of those come in this category of far-reaching public health. Is that all the Boykin stuff? Is that the category that you're lumping these in on the previous
So the
slide?
10 million, first 10 million, which you can say 10 million of the almost 11 million in the Boykin campus can be drawn into the general fund and used for whatever we want.
Lots of revenue.
Yes, and I am proposing to use it in Northwest Auburn anyway, because we plan to do the Boykin project. We had a lot of people impacted in that community in particular, and this provides some things, you know, fun things to do, and also the same with the water line. We were going to do the MLK Streetscape project anyway, and this has taken $1 million less, and that water line.
Yeah, I'm not arguing.
No, I'm just
I'm just
explaining.
trying to figure what category it falls. Loss of public service revenue or public health, and then, you know, the previous chart. Yeah,
It's
those 4 things.
it's the respond to, well, the 10 million comes in, we get revenue replacement. That's the max drawdown.
So we lost 10 million.
We didn't have to, we can take, that's the maximum we can take. We didn't lose quite 10 million, but we're able to draw down all 10 million. It's unrestricted. If you do the formula a different way, then we would have more funds restricted.
It's like a standard deduction.
Yep. So you want to go ahead, not everybody we got 16.5 because of our population size. Not every community in this area is eligible to draw down the full 10 million because they didn't get that funding. We are. And that gives us, that's unrestricted in terms of how we use it. But we still have to document how we used it, correct? Just to say that we did spend the funds and yes,
So-
what else, Eric?
So that 10 million, it couldn't go toward the gym?
No, ma'am, it's already going toward the Boykin project, as the library is in, the splash pad, and the cultural center for now. It's already going toward the project to make the budget affordable as it is. It's an extra 10 million to help do more, or I would be recommending even less at Boykin or somewhere else, or we wouldn't be doing the multi-purpose fields or something. That 10 million is already in the mix, and that's why we're spending it at Boykin. I would have to find another $20 to $22 million to do the gym in the budget, and I don't have it right now when you guys see the full capital stack. The gym can come later, but not in this biennium, if we're gonna meet needs across the city. And it's not about the location of either this or Lake Wilmore. It is about gymnasium space versus fields. We need both. And so this is about delivering both. So that's why I recommended the way that I did.
All right, so you got 10 million in category 1 there, replace public sector revenue, basically a deduction, like you say.
Yep, that leaves the rest
So
of
got
the,
another million basically still going to Boykin. Got another million going to, well, looks like almost 2.7 million going to Boykin. Roughly.
in one way or another,
Yeah.
yeah.
And those fall under far-reaching public health, or how are we justifying that, using that money is all I'm saying? Which of those 4 categories?
So it is the far-reaching public health, and it's referenced in the grant guidance that if it's within recreational facilities to revitalize public spaces, that we can use it for that. It's directly referenced there.
Okay.
So that's why, and it is in that
Okay,
category.
and the water part, I understand that,
Yeah.
sewer thing, makes sense.
And that's why, to your exact point, Councilman Griswold, is why we waited so long. is to have the final guidance, so that we did not, we don't do that, so we did not misstep with the funds. And we have to be very careful in how we document.
Okay.
And yes, on the coronavirus side, all air conditioning installations, et cetera, qualify for public health reasons.
Megan, I commend the staff. I understand there was a lot of pressure to start distributing that money, and y'all held on to it until you got your orders from the feds, and I appreciate you doing that.
Well, we appreciate your patience with it. The goal here was to do this the right way. But if the federal government's going to make this decision to have this money and distribute it to us, we're certainly going to use it, and use it in the best way we can that helps the most citizens and has the least impact to our bottom line all at the same time, so that we can do more. All right, it's about the end of me. So this is on page 14, and I appreciate the reminder, Connie. So just to give you, an overview, our long-reaching goals, we're supposed to have an ending balance. Well, we have a very large ending balance of $41.6 million in fiscal 23, and in fiscal 24 of $34.2 million. And Allison, our goal is, council's goal is 20%. And then staff management has a goal of 25%. And so then you see the ratios there. That's the ending balance raw dollar amount. And then the next thing is the ratio. We're at 29.57% in 23 and 26.52% in 24. That goes down a little bit because we're sitting on, as we have been your entire tenure, it's very hard to get capital projects done. So when they don't get done, they roll to the next year, so we have a big ending balance. And so we are spending and dipping into some of that ending balance, which we should be, to do capital projects. I'm not here to sit on the citizens' money, and I'm not picking on our friends Mountain Brook, but say if we were doing a $100 million budget, the bond rating agencies would like for us to be sitting on a $100 million fund balance. That's not responsible, in my opinion, and it's fine. Mountain Brook is able to do that and sustain that. We are not. We are a growing community. We're sitting on ample reserves and an ample fund balance to have good bond ratings, but be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. We also have basically a savings account also in the event of emergency. We sit on some cash. There's other things that we do, but it's very fiscal sound policy with this. And we already talked about the personnel services as a percentage of expenditures in the general fund. We keep that low, and that's with adding all these positions. And so this kind of shows you in the bottom line the $140 million budget in fiscal 23 drops to 129 in fiscal 24. Remember, revenues, Allison's going to talk to you a little bit about revenues and where we go. They're usually higher than we projected, and that will drag those numbers up significantly. But that is basically the end of my overview. If you guys need a quick restroom, you've been going an hour. Council, would you like break? Anyone else to go into revenue and stuff? You good? Anybody need something?
Right? Good.
All right.
Let's roll.
Allison is going to roll.
We think we see that 16 million, or is that seems for us?
We have it all now, yes. We just got the second, 2 weeks ago. Earning a teeny tiny bit of interest right now.
That's a relative term.
Yeah. Okay, so in the financial overview, I'm going to go over a couple more things from what Megan just talked about with the ending fund balance percentages. Talk about revenue, how we're going to pay for all the things she's talked about, and all the things in capital that you'll hear from our business service unit directors, and what we're planning to do for debt, and then a brief little overview of our enterprise fund, net position, and how those funds are looking over the next 2 years. So this is the same thing that Megan just showed. It's just a little bit different presentation. I wanted you to see where we ended 20 and 21. So remember the last time we had the biennial budget presentation, we were coming out of, this was like June or July, August of 2020. We had just seen the brunt of pandemic closures, that kind of thing. And so we ended that year, revenue was not as bad as we thought it was going to be. We were very flat with sales tax, and you'll see that in a chart in just a few minutes. But we also didn't spend as much. I mean, when you don't have anything going on in town, then we're not doing programs, we kind of put the brakes on capital a little bit to see how this was going to come out. then you have a lot less spending. So we ended right here with 67%, which is huge. That's a very big reserve. Not something that we aimed to do, but something that came out of COVID. And then in 21, you know, we were still coming out of that, kind of getting back up to speed, and see expenditures go up. That percentage is at 60. So we are starting out, these are very healthy unbalanced reserves, and that's where we're starting from as we get into 22, 23, and 24.
And Allison, that's because we weren't doing the projects that we
Just
had
not
counted for.
exactly.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
It's not-
We definitely put the brakes on.
Yeah, it's not like someone can just look at that and go, well, now you have $60 million to go and do things.
And these are great, you know, this percentage is something the rating agencies look at. We adopted that 20% goal. We kind of keep the 25 as management, that 25% goal. They want to see us meet that. They want to see that we can project out for years, still meet that. But then we also have to remember that we're not a bank. We have taxpayer money. We need to make plans to spend that. We need to get down from these 60% ratios and get back down to our 25%, which is where we're going.
At some point, will we, if this even matters for years to come, will we asterisk these years as COVID pandemic years?
Absolutely. The same way we did 2008, 2009 with recession. Things are funny, and you'll see that in my.
And you'll see some baseline things and the departmental things. We're giving you a lot of metrics like people we service and things. A lot of those relate back to 2019 for good reason, because that was the last normal year, and so you'll see a lot relate back to that, just to give you a better perspective.
And for sales tax in particular, I do want to take us back and just see how we came out of that and what it looks like, because we got some very interesting trends right now.
It's a nice way of putting it.
Interesting, very interesting, very difficult to project. But obviously revenue is the foundation of the budget. We rely on staff knowledge of our revenue sources. We have really long-term staff, not calling anybody old over here, but I'm putting myself in that. We've been here a long time. We understand the revenue structure. We know how it works and how things affect it, how the economy affects it, all of those things. So we know all of that. Also trends from prior years. You can see, and you'll see in some of the charts I have up here, it's very predictable. You know, things go up and down based on different things. And they're not easy to predict, but we do definitely have the prior year trends. And then keeping up with economic factors. Megan mentioned recession. I will mention that again in a minute as we talk about sales tax and occupational license fee, but those are things that we have to follow. I'm not an economist. I do not. There's a lot of things about that I don't know about, but I know where to find it, and we have financial advisors that help us do that. So starting here, just as a reminder to you of what our top 10 revenue sources are. Now these top 10 sources are 90% of the general fund revenue. So even though we budget every single little line item that we have some charges for services in different areas that we budget for. This is the bulk of what we have. I'm not going to cover all 10 of them. I'm going to do the top 4, and then I'm going to pull a couple out because I want you to see how we have come out of COVID for those couple of revenue sources. So, sales and use tax, as you know, is our top revenue source in the general fund. Our sales tax total in Auburn is 9%, 4 of that is city, 4 is state, 1% goes to Lee County. So that's what you're paying when you pay your 9% sales tax. It is our largest revenue source. 50%, around 50% of the general fund revenue is from sales and use tax. And that can be a little scary. I mean, sales tax is very volatile. It's very, things change with it when the economy changes. It's up and down depending on what's going on. It has increased an average of 5.3% for the past 5 years, even with the COVID year. So sales tax during COVID, and you can see it right here, during the majority of the closure was very flat. So we didn't really lose. Flat was good, was not what we expected. We expected it to be a little bit lower. Football season, and we are really getting into other sports now that affect what goes on.
Everything.
Everything. It's an everything school, right? That affects sales tax. It's just a huge thing. So football season is something we always look at. Depending on who we play, you kind of know what's going to happen with sales tax. So FY '22, which is the green bar, we're projecting that to end 9% higher than '21, and that is pretty significant. You'll see in the next chart that I show you how much higher we are right now than we have been in the past. Megan mentioned conservative projections, 2% for these 2 years. Now, I'm not going back to 19 levels and projecting. We're projecting off of 22 because prices being higher, inflation, all of those things, we get more sales tax when that's going on. At the same time, we pay more for the things that we do as well. So we need that revenue to be high to deal with those price changes and inflation. This is sales tax monthly, and this is for 19 through 22. It's something that you see in the monthly financial report that we send out. And you can really tell what happens October, November, December, football season. Always got different things going on there. We have to look at Georgia and Alabama being here in the same year, other teams that we might be playing. And this is where we started with COVID. This was the year, this was 19, calendar 19, the fall of 19, fiscal 20. We had a fantastic football season. We had Georgia and Alabama here. This was when Georgia was still in November. Great season. And then, all the way down, all the way to February. January is a high because of Christmas shopping season, but it's not usually as high as that football time period in there. Go down in February. February collections over January is a very slow time period. Went back up a little, and then here is where you see us drop all the way down. This is May collections, which represents April activity, and April was the month when most everything was closed. And so it makes perfect sense that that went just like that. Didn't go as low as we thought. Started coming right back up. Started recovering just a little bit towards the end of fiscal 20. 21, again, we start over here, the purple line, starting right here, come over here, and then what happened at that time period? Very limited football season, right? We started later, we had limited capacity, no tailgating, all the things that happened during that football season, you see that in this dip. Just a very different time. And then we started rising again. This is where we went. Mask mandates started changing, everything's open, we're shooting way up, people are just going nuts because they've been quarantined, right? People have been up, they wanted to shop, they wanted to do things. And this is September collections, August collections, sorry. September collections for August sales. Well, that's because Auburn University came back, right? They had been gone, Auburn University's back. They brought 20 people to everything they did, and so this is just amazing. We saw these raises because Camp War Eagle, those freshmen brought every person in their family when they did Camp War Eagle. So that all happened here. And then we go back up here to the blue line. This is the beginning of this fiscal year, continues to be high. Had a really, really great football season. Things look a little different because Georgia was moved, it was here, but it was moved to October, so things look a little different there. The normal decrease throughout the winter, and then we're starting to come back up. One thing that is not on here is May, which I just now have, and May is nearly 5 million. Again, for April activity, which is generally a slower time period. I haven't seen June yet, we won't see that until a little bit later in the month, but for graduation and all the things that happened in May, we're going to see that be high again. So we're in a really good shape here, but what happens from here is what's so difficult to predict. Any questions about that? Okay. All right. Same slide as I showed just a minute ago. I just wanted to talk through with you kind of how I'm projecting 23 and 24, you remember the last time I presented, I talked about how we broke out every category of business. We needed to project the ones that were closed differently than the ones that were essential, all those kind of things. So we're not having to do quite that much detail now, but again, we do still look at football season. We have the first 5 games of this football season are at home. 4 of those are in September, so you'll see that in September, and October collections will represent there. Penn State, from what I hear, is a really big game, right? So we're expecting a lot of people here for that game. And then we have 2 additional SEC games. We had 8 home games this year, we had 7 last year, not Georgia and Alabama, but we do have 4 SEC games here. Recession uncertainty with sales tax. So if you follow what's going on in the economy and read articles and listen to some of our top national economists talk, they all have a different opinion. Some think we are in the highest risk we've ever seen. We know something's going to happen. It's going to be a year from now. Some say it's going to be further down the road. I feel like there will be something. I don't know exactly what that is yet. And I mean, I just read an article today that made me a little more nervous, and then I will have another one that makes me not quite as nervous. So I don't think anybody really knows. It's just such an interesting time period. Also, we also have, I just wanted to mention new commercial developments. Megan mentioned Buc-ee's. I mean, we have some things that are going to bring new revenue to the city. These are not, you know, that's not cannibalism from anywhere else. That's going to be brand new stuff. We have Target. You know, there are a lot of Target lovers in this area. Hopefully, we're going to get the ones that go to Outlay and they're going to come here. So there are some things that will be happening in the next couple of years. 2% projection for both years. That is incredibly conservative, in my opinion, for now. So that was sales tax. Simplified seller's use. The main reason I wanted to show you this again, this is the 8% tax collected for online sales for any company or business that is not required to pay our sales tax for some other reason. If they have a nexus in the state, they have a store in the state, they're supposed to pay our sales tax. This is Amazon, those that do not have that. 50% of that tax goes to the state. They keep it, do whatever they do with it. And then the remaining 50% comes to cities and counties, 30% and 20%, distributed by population. So finally, our population has been updated. So this is where you see our projections. So what we got in fiscal 21, this is actual numbers. Our adjusted budget for 22 is 4.3 because our population was updated and we're getting a bigger share of that now. So that's a big deal. In addition to the fact that online sales are more, people continue to do more online when they can. This one is projected 23 and 24 a little bit higher at 3%, just because I know, you know, even if recession starts, I feel like people may shift to online to save money in different areas, and so that one is projected just a little bit higher. Occupation license is our second largest revenue source. It's about 14% of our general fund revenue. It's a very important revenue source, $14 to $15 million a year. It has increased an average of 4.4% for the past 5 years. It actually surprisingly remained pretty steady during the pandemic. I know Philip and I talked a lot during that time about who was laying off, who might potentially close for a while, all of those kind of things. But we stayed pretty steady, and this revenue source, as you can see, just increases steadily throughout the years. 22 is projected to be 1.7 higher than 21, and that's based on actual collections that we had already had through April. So, and that it probably will be a little bit more than that. And then 2% again for conservative. Now, this is something that, you know, recession will affect if it happens, because if we go into something like we saw in 2008, 2009, we will lose some of that employment will be lost. Now, one of the things about recession is that the labor market is a big factor in whether we go into recession. And the labor market's really great right now. It is nationally. Unemployment rates are low, so that may be keeping us from going there as fast as some think we might. Business license is our third largest revenue source. Included in that are general business licenses, which is just all the businesses in the city, residential rental, which is our long-term apartment-like, long-term lease type things. That's what residential rental is. Commercial rental, we have a small amount of commercial rental. And then our Contractors Quarterly, which is something that contractors pay when they're building something in Auburn. They pay a license fee for that. 13 to 15% of our general fund revenue, and it has increased an average of 5.1% for the past 5 years. It is based on, most of these are based on the gross receipts from the prior calendar year. So what we see right here, what we collected in 2021 makes very much sense about why it's lower, because it was based on 2020 gross receipts. That was when everything was closed. And so we did expect gross receipts to be lower, and it finished about where we thought it would. Again, these are projected at 2% for 23 and 24. Ad valorem taxes, and so this is going to include all the real property tax, motor vehicle, personal property, and we have government services fees mixed in with that. And those are fees that are paid by organizations that may not have to pay property tax. So if it's like a business that is in an industrial park leasing something that's owned by the industrial board and there are no property taxes for that type of property, they pay something in lieu of that. So we do get money from them from that. This is the most stable of our sources. It has averaged 8% increases over the past 5 years. This is just general fund, so it's 5 mills. And I'm projecting to end the year a lot based on collections, because we've already collected the majority of the real property tax here, 4.8%. And then again, 23 and 24 are projected at 3%. We use that percentage most every year, and we use it in every fund that has ad valorem tax. This would be a lagging indicator, so if we went into recession, we wouldn't see that right away. We would see it later, because it's based on property values from the prior year. Our lodging tax. It suffered so much during the pandemic. Our lodging tax is 13%, with 7 being for the city, 4 for the state, 2 for the county. And what the county levies is collected by AO Tourism and used by the Tourism Bureau. Okay? It's the 7th largest source. It used to be the 6th. Historically, it's been the 6th largest source, and SSUT just booted it out, and it is now the 7th largest source. Hardest hit during the pandemic, but it, as you can see, has recovered very nicely. We are projecting 22 to be 30% higher than what we saw in 21. And I don't expect much to change with that in 23 and 24, as long as there's not a significant recession component to that. So it's for
A lot of these
forecasting.
actually doesn't show up on these charts, these various pie charts and stuff.
Yeah, so, where's it showing? It's in there, maybe grouped with some other things.
Okay. Or in the tables on pages 34 and 35.
All right, so if you look on page 32, it's listed there. Now, on the table with the pie charts, it's going to be grouped in our locally levied taxes. And I always share construction permits just because it's so volatile. It changes just depending on what's going on in the year. It's interesting to me that 2020 was our biggest year. I think we noticed that during the pandemic nothing stopped there. Construction just went right on. That was the biggest permit year. It did. The fact that our sales tax was flat, a couple of things happened with lodging tax. This revenue source did a lot to fill that gap in 2020. I am projecting that it will be 18% lower in 22, and that's based on what we've collected so far. And then leaving the projection pretty flat for 23 and 24, because we just don't know what would happen. And you can see from this chart, I do this chart a little differently so you can see how different it can be. We don't want to be too aggressive with that projection. Any questions about that? And this is a result of from 22 being lower. It's the number of permits and the valuation. There are two things that we look at when we're looking at how that changes.
Allison, is it also capacity of building, like of labor and?
Sure it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it even goes back to 15, you can see like,
Yes.
you have a spike and then a downturn.
Mhm.
And is that driven off of capacity?
Yes. It's also driven off of, a lot of commercial permits, so, larger apartment buildings in the years they permit, and a number of them do, that was a significant, these are $50 to $80 million projects. Disclaimer, not projects we recruited, and I want to be very clear on that. That's just the reality in our marketplace. But you're about to have another one permit, which will cause it up, and you've got a downtown building under construction now, and some of that will trend up. It just depends Depends on what we're doing on industrial and otherwise at the time.
And a lot of that we explain in the monthly financials. If we see something that's like crazy, that's very different from last year, explain that we had something big over the prior year or this year. And just quickly, total revenue. Our total revenue has increased 5.8% over the past 5 years. FY22 is projected in 7.5% higher. And then FY23, even though we've got increases here and there for the various revenue sources, when you get down to the bottom in total, a little less than, well, it's about 1.2% increase. Again, that is being very conservative when we're not sure about recession and what might happen in 23. As Megan mentioned, we can always adjust if we get more and make determinations about spending more should something like that not happen. And then 2% for 24 over 23. So before I get into debt, any questions, any specific questions about any of the revenue sources?
I know this past year we had some legislative concerns about the occupational license fees. Where are we on that from a legislative perspective?
At the moment, that didn't make it out of committee to the Senate floor. It never went anywhere in the House. We don't know that it will come back up in the next session, but it is likely to.
Okay.
All right, well, debt is another pretty large factor in developing the budget. We use our debt policy to guide our decisions about what we're going to finance with debt. A couple of points from our debt policy is that we only borrow for long-term capital projects that have significant cost. Never for anything, that's real. We try to not do things that are real small, and we try to never ever borrow for operations. So you'll never see anything like that. We also do the term. So when you see my projections for debt service, we stick with 20 years. You don't want to go too long and have outrageous interest cost if it's possible. And so conservatively, we use a rate when we're projecting. Right now, I'm using 5% because it has ticked up a little bit. And then that term. It doesn't mean that we will structure it that way when we do it. This is almost a worst case. This is what we can do when we do that. So right now, we are getting ready to borrow $55 million. And this year, we will do that before the end of this fiscal year. And that's for projects that you have already approved, that have started. That is the soccer complex, Wilbin Parkway, and the ES Public Works facility. Those will be in that borrowing. Additional plans are for the Lake Wilmore Community Center. We would issue that towards the end. Go ahead.
Is this in the packet?
Where are we?
This is on, give me the page of that. I'm sorry, I didn't write that page number down. Page 99. Yep. What you'll see on 99 is proposed borrowing in total at the bottom. Got that? Okay. It's the same chart, the colors are a little different.
And you guys will have this, I'll email it to you tomorrow, it'll be on the website, so you can also refer to the PowerPoint if you need to.
Towards the end of fiscal 23, we would try to push the borrowing out as far as we can. We always want the project bid. We want to know the exact cost before making decisions about borrowing. So we would push Lake Wilmore out to the end of fiscal 23. Debt service wouldn't start, and that's what you see in the light blue, wouldn't start until 2024. The last proposed borrowing is towards the end of fiscal 2024, 31.5, which will cover the Boyd campus improvements that are not funded by rescue plan funds, in addition to the Lake Wilmore multi-purpose fields. But again, this timing of the borrowing has nothing to do with when the project may start. It has all to do with, let's push it out, let's get the debt service in the year that we need. We can always bring a reimbursement resolution to you so that we can start spending ahead of the debt issuance. But it gets us where we need to be here with ratios. Our key indicators are debt service as a percentage of expenditures and of revenues. We try to keep both of those down below 10%. And we do that well each year. I'll forecast it out here. Our capacity for the future will depend on revenue, kind of what's happening with revenue in the future. Okay, this is our current borrowing, and you can see we start really dropping off. The last thing we borrowed for was the parking debt. And so we have seen some of our older debt start dropping off, and we've got capacity for this. Questions about that? Quickly, just an overview of the enterprise funds. We have the sewer fund. This accounts for our wastewater function. This is the city's second largest fund. Okay, the sewer fund has always been self-supporting. We intend for that to continue, even with their capital. You can kind of see their revenue and expense trends. I think this chart's interesting because those kind of always track exactly the same. Sewer, is based on water usage, so things vary in wet years versus dry years, things like that we have to consider. And again, be a little conservative in our revenue projections for it. The last rate change was in October of 2012, and if you look at this is actually not in there. So this is the projection out past the 24 budget that shows the capital, all the things that the sewer fund needs. And I have this in here to just show you that the net position stays very healthy, even with that. We have a couple of big projects coming up in sewer. Because of the cash position, it's very likely that we won't have to borrow. We're going to try not to do that if we can keep our net position levels where they need to be. But sewer funds its own debt, it funds its own capital, everything happens there. We don't want to get, nobody wants to talk about rate changes or anything like that, but it's important that we study it. It doesn't mean anything will change, it just means let's make sure we're keeping up and that this fund can continue to support itself with the users that it has and the growth that we have. We should be good with that.
We're not general fund subsidizing it, and that's the way we want to keep it. But rate studies, mind you, anything done either justifies where we are. You cannot just raise rates if you were thinking of, the council's not ever done that, but I just mean, it's not how that works. It has to have a nexus to a study, it has to be absolutely justifiable, but it does need to make sure that this fund is long-term viable so the general fund isn't subsidizing it.
Similar situation for the solid waste management fund. This is the solid waste and recycling functions of both in this fund. It is also self-supporting. It used to be in the general fund years ago. The general fund did a lot of subsidizing at that point because it was in the general fund. We pulled it out. It's treated more like a business now. And the general fund has subsidized in the past, particularly for capital equipment related to recycling. We have done that, but we don't have any plans for that in this budget. What you will see though, our net position stays healthy here, but in the out years, when we get to some of these capital items over here that will be needed, this net position is going to start going down. So the rate study here is going to be as important, maybe even more important, because we need to be sure that we're covering and making sure this fund is self-sufficient. So again, it doesn't mean we will raise rates. It doesn't mean anything. It means we need to study it and see where we go with that. And I believe this has any new positions, anything that is in the budget is showing here. Showing here in the expenses. Any questions about that?
Questions?
About a 5-minute break, and then we're going to roll into capital projects. Just to give you a few minutes of break. We can reload. You guys have snacks. You can have snacks. There's plenty. You can have snacks. Caffeine. All right, we're going to roll into the capital improvement program and capital outlay. The executive directors by business unit will just be running over. Their presentations are a little bit shorter than ours. Your page references pretty much you're going to get in the back. Scott's got this right up here on the first slide, page 140, 146 or so starts the capital program, and he'll carry you through.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to go over these projects. It's exciting to be able to have the revenue objectives and projects that we're going to discuss today. We've been on a lot of the efforts of the city engineer, water resource management director, public works, public safety, fire, you know, all the folks that have been involved heavily with developing these projects and planning these projects out. A lot of work goes into that. Back in the old days when I was an engineer, yeah, I know what it's like to put together and plan and develop these concepts, and put these cost estimates together. So there's a lot of work that's gone in behind the scenes to be able to put this together. So as we go through this, I do want to follow pretty much what's in the outline and what's in the back of your book, starting at about 146. And that's where we'll get into the sidewalks. And this project here is something that you've already approved. Did want to show this because it is a project that will be performed in the next fiscal year. That money will actually come out of the budget in that fiscal year. But this is the North College Street Railroad Crossing. This is an important project to us in order to get an accessible crossing at one of our railroad crossings in downtown for pedestrians. And we have the good fortune of Outlay coming to us with a grant opportunity. The city's only having to fund 10% of the total project cost. And again, that's already been approved. Another project that's a carryover from the 22 budget, we're moving some of the work into 23, is the Camden Ridge Subdivision Sidewalk. This will provide what's in orange on here will provide connectivity to some of the existing sidewalk network that's in the neighborhood to be able to close that out. There will be some hybrid work going with that. What I mean by that is we'll do some of the work in-house through Public Works and look at contracting some of the work out in order to get this performed. Moving into some downtown master plan improvement projects. This is on 146 in your budget document. So I want to highlight this project. This project's already underway. Funds are committed. This is the South College, Sanford Avenue, Gate Street, all the intersection improvements. If you wasn't aware of this project's going on, you need to ride out there. Saw it this morning. Very active construction going on here. But I want to point out that just make sure, keep in mind the extent of this project, which is pretty massive. As you start around the parking deck, go all the way down to Garden Drive, road improvements, through lanes on the main road, intersection improvements at Gate Street, Sanford and College, and sidewalk improvements. We'll be able to have sidewalk connectivity. Just to remind you, the project all the way to the Arboretum on the west side of College Street. The reason I wanted to highlight this project is, if you recall, we actually pulled the lighting plan out of the project because the numbers came in so high. We felt like we could get a better price in. City engineer worked with Valdite, got very creative with them, and they were pull that out. We're going to rebid that. Conduits going in the ground with the project I just presented to you. So this project will just be installing the pedestrian lighting and the street lighting associated with that project. So that project will actually be able to work in conjunction with the current project, so we can finish the projects at the same time. Is that right, City Engineer?
Yes.
And $518,000 is what we've got planned for that work. Miller Avenue sidewalk and lighting. This is a project, much needed sidewalk improvement with some lighting to be able to connect from Gay Street along Miller down to work's been recently completed at the BG House in order to provide pedestrian. This is a very active corridor, pedestrian corridor in the community. A lot of people will park over here on Armstrong, walk through. A lot of residents over there using. So where people are walking, we definitely want to give them a good area to walk in, a good, safe, comfortable area to traverse. So diverting attention over to some traffic and transportation improvements. If you want to flip over to 148, those are outlined in there. And again, I'm just touching on a lot of the high points in there. So there's other projects that are in the CIP that you'll see, but I do want to highlight
And
some.
Scott, real quick, and remember, these are only the 23 and 24 projects. We're not going over the latter 4 years, but that's giving you an idea of what we plan to do. Things like Donahue that I mentioned, the other things, those come later, but they're signaling that we're preparing to do those projects. Now we're expecting to do those in later fiscal years.
That's a good point, and we do need to have those on our radar as we plan and complete these projects. What we're looking ahead. get to. Martin Luther King Drive, Streetscape, should to Donahue. This is a project we're excited to be bringing back to you. This project really just helps complete the city's vision in order to provide gateway into Auburn. And Martin Luther King Drive area is a great place to be able to do this. We'll be adding medians, turn lanes, sidewalks, lighting, and this will connect sidewalk corridor all the way from Donahue to the new Martin Luther King multi-use path, which will get you all the way to Chadwick Lane. And so this is just a major connection in addition to the appearance that it will bring to that area, and really just building up a sense of community and a sense of arrival as you come into this gateway in Auburn. So we're excited about this project. The budget cost is at $5,155,950. There's an additional to that, and city manager mentioned this earlier, is there is $1 million noted down here that will actually be performed by Auburn Waterworks, and that money is actually being refunded through the Recovery Act money. So total project cost in there is in the $6 million range. It's estimated to start, say, FY22. Project's kicked back off. There's a public meeting that we'll be planning for the fiscal years up in order to get this project moving in 2023.
Where is that in the packet? Is that in?
This?
Should be on page 148.
148, page 148.
Diagrams.
Oh, the diagrams are going to be in your packet.
Oh,
You don't have that slide in your packet.
And those are the same things that are basically out on the website on the Streetscape page that we have today.
So, pointing out to Wilbin Parkway, you're aware of this project. This project's been awarded, it's under construction, and it'll provide a major connection from Martin Luther King Drive to Richmond Road. The reason I want to point this project out, this was, came as an opportunity. It was on a major street plan, a project we were looking at. Subdivision came in, Plainsman Lake gave us the opportunity to go ahead and get this project moving. So the reason I bring that project up is I want to point out a relative project to that, which is you'll see intersection improvements for traffic signals at the Wilbin Parkway intersection with Martin Luther King Drive, as well as at Webster Road. And that project is at $669,500 and is expected to be done this next fiscal year. Annual resurfacing.
I'm sorry, Scott.
I'm
So
sorry.
that will be there. Is that a two-lane parkway? Or how many lanes of traffic will that be
It's-
getting?
it's 2 lanes,
Two.
with some sections of 3 lanes.
You got turn lanes, but you have a multi-use path on there,
On the east side, yes.
but not a separate striped bike lane.
Correct.
Okay. Multi-use, share it, yeah.
So Scott, that's 2 lights, so that 669 covers both of those intersections?
Yes.
Those lights will work in tandem, and this was, the city engineer worked extremely hard to get AlDOT to agree to this. This has been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that when we learned that we could not align, you can see the Chinese restaurant to the north of the traffic signal at current Webster. That's property in the county. We have no authority to build the road through property in the county, and no legal authority. Not that this council or any council before has been keen on its ability to condemn property for public interest. But should you have even thought you might want to do that, we can't do that in property not in the city limits. The city of Huntsville's lost many a lawsuit over trying to do that. So we had to offset the road, and the only way to make this, we have trouble at Webster and Highway 14, and unfortunately, we were going to push the intersection further away from the railroad tracks to make it safer. We can't do that because we can't get the property to do it. So the best solution at least was to have dual signals. They will work together, but it will be a much safer situation in the vicinity in terms of people's ability to turn left off of Webster onto Highway 14 and getting out from Wilbin Parkway.
And isn't the developer who's working there gonna provide right away, what's the name of that, Lakes right?
Yes, we just went through planning commission with that, and that's hitting this council agenda, is that correct, on the 21st?
What's the name of the Lakes project?
Plainsman Lake. They're doing that, and they've made some contribution toward aspects of this as well, because of some turn lanes and other things.
Yes, they're making the financial contribution will be part of their development as they get lots of plans. So they will make-
Yeah, that was a big deal. So they had a big chunk of the right-of-way. The schools had a small piece, and then a lot of it goes through on the northern end, go back the other side, Scott, through park property, future originally park property that we own. But that big, purpley gray area kind of is city and schools combined. The schools is on the lower piece of it. So we had the lion's share of it, but we were able to acquire that through that development agreement.
Is there a grade change of the railroad crossing at Webster involving that? We really do.
No, so when we lost the ability to realign the intersection the way that we wanted to, that was gonna fix all of that. We will continue to have signs and work with the Industrial Development Board trying to discourage semi-trucks from going that way, because they also get stuck and it's got that sign. It's not our ideal situation, but to get AlDOT to move on 2 traffic signals in that location has been quite an amazing feat. So I'm very pleased that we were at least able to do that in the alternative. And this project came in under budget when it was a good thing too.
Yeah.
For once.
Great work, Allison. Anything else on that? So, annual resurfacing and restriping program. So, we've upped the ante a little bit on for 23 and 24, proposing to invest $3 million in a resurfacing and restriping program. We've seen accelerated degrading of our streets over the past few years. A lot of the rain has played into that. Other project factors have come into play with that. But I also want to highlight on this, this involves what we do annually, what we invest in annually to go in and do resurfacing, where you see the milling and resurfacing, depending on how much the road needs to be restructured, and curb and gutter, sidewalk improvements sometimes, things where we see some ADA accessibility issues to resolve. It also involves going in and putting on from fresh new striping in other roads that the striping is deteriorating. So all that kind of goes into what's in this $3 million. So I wanted to point out too, in the past, you're probably used to seeing a list of streets that we propose for each of those years. The reason you don't see that list is because we're still pulling that list together. And the way we've done that, and applaud the efforts of our city engineer and our works department. And so what we've done is we hired a contractor. You hired a contractor this past year to do an assessment of the street. They drive around in this little strange van, and it's got a lot of detection equipment in there that's measuring defects in the street as it drives through the bumps in the roads and all this kind of stuff. So everything you're feeling, all those sensors in the van are feeling that. They're taking photographs of the streets and things of that nature. That data comes in, and that's what they use to begin to analyze those streets. That grades the streets, and it scores those streets. And so we'll be able to actually have some scoring that'll help us prioritize each of those streets. Being right there. Be able to score those streets, and that'll be able to give us the justification of where we're spending money to improve streets based on the worst streets each year. There's lots more we'll be able to get out of that data as far as being able to identify rehab projects that we can go through, and maybe Public Works or our contractor could go in and fix a few potholes, and all of a sudden we take a bad street and make it good. And that gets that street another 10 or 15 years down the road before we have to go into a major rehab program on that. So, a lot of those little things right there really help step up the asset management program in our street network. So looking forward to getting that fully implemented and getting that going. So
With higher volumes of traffic and construction traffic, we're seeing major impact to our arterial roads, meaning heavy trucks do cause, and I'm not talking about semi-trucks as much as dump trucks. You also see in front of the junior high school on Dean Road, you see big lane overlays on the right side, and City Engineer Frater, that went a lot further than we expected it to go because we got in there and found bad conditions on the road. So some of this analysis we're doing will tell us sooner than when the contractor gets out there. We also weren't initially slated to do all of East University Drive that we did, but it degraded so quickly that you saw a larger section get done, and it's actually easier when they get in there if they just do a whole bit of it. So that's part of what this analysis is telling us. When we do have a list, we will share that with the council. But this is signaling an increase of $1 million or $500,000, $1 million a year to get caught up, and then you'll see it in latter years in the CIP drop back down. We think the next 2 years, if we add an extra $1 million, will get us caught up with some things.
So all this analysis you talked about is already underway?
Yes.
And when do you expect to report back?
You have an update?
We've received the preliminary data from the consultant, but we have not analyzed it yet or received the prioritization. So we're still going through what they've given us back as far as the ratings.
They'll give us a priority.
So hopefully
in
the
terms
next
of,
month or
yeah,
so.
yep.
Next month or so, we ought to see a list?
We ought to be finalized internally within the next month or so.
Yeah,
So
I
we'll have a
don't,
list shortly after that.
When we see a list?
we'll get you a list as soon as we can. What we want to do is we didn't want to set expectations based on what we knew previously from our own ratings and where this is. And like I said, on the major arterials, and you'll see it on some of them in town, and all of a sudden we're seeing potholes in places we weren't seeing them and other things, and all of a sudden we're starting to see some problems. So some of those are going to switch priority. And in all of your wards, people care about their local streets. On average, a local street is a 20 to 30 year window before it gets done on average. And that just depends on a number of things. But we have some smaller projects you'll see here because of block grant funding, Bickerstaff is coming up.
And one of the things, as an outcome of this project, is to have the GIS data outward facing that has all of the ratings. So once we produce our list, that information can go on the website and people can see where their streets are as far as the rating and hopefully where the prioritization goes. Thank you.
That's a good point. Thanks for mentioning that, Allison. Another street improvement we have in this biennium is slated for FY23, $1,903,500 for North East Road, East University Drive intersection improvements. This will involve pretty extensive work for widening, adding, we have dual turn lanes from North Dean Road onto East University. So that'll help free up some of the traffic, mitigate some of the accident issues we've had, and other traffic flow issues and concerns that we've had at this intersection.
Do we have a lot of, I travel this every day, and I've not ever seen an accident there, so do we have a lot?
We're having a lot of stacking problems. A lot of the city engineers in the citywide traffic study, you saw that in May of 2019, which is a while ago.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge that, but you get the stack from this intersection going past the car wash and the daycare bad because of Ward 3's growth we see and the lack of connectivity of streets in the north-south direction. It's a heavily used intersection to commute to and from, and that's where we're seeing the biggest backup. So we are having conflicts. The daycare / car wash and those driveways are as far south as we can make them. And City Engineer Frazier, is there any other issue?
No.
You are seeing some accidents, but yeah. A lot of that is caused by the yield turn lane, the right turn yield, which you would do frequently. People will turn left and somebody will not stop, following the traffic laws. So, yeah. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Driver error is our #1 issue at most intersections, not the intersection itself. So that's surprising to you, I know, but I'm just saying.
So referencing this project only because we're anticipating it to be done in the next biennium is the Sugar Parkway widening. This is totally funded by A-Trip 2 funding. Excited that AlDOT came to us with this project. It enables us to add some turn lanes, make a safer road for this part of our community. And all of the council did authorize a contract with the AlDOT in order to pay for any overages to this project so that we can get it completed. The Antelope Drive, East University Drive intersection improvements, we've talked about this for a while. This is something that we're trying to launch now. But this will involve, we've already closed this section of Sagahatchee to try to mitigate some of the traffic issues we have here, and they will involve a median here to prevent left turn out of Sagahatchee on East University. It'll add turn lanes here to improving this intersection.
Will Sagahatchee come back online?
No.
No.
How would they have a left turn off Sidewalk?
That section is Sagahatchee.
Oh, left off of
There- yeah.
Analyte, okay.
No.
No?
Existing Sagahatchee
This is
has a porch out.
Sagahatchee.
It's a right turn in and a right turn out. There'll be a median poured there, which isn't there today. So that you're not sitting there with traffic stacking up behind you and getting a rear end collision condition, which we still have even with the changes there. So for those folks, if they want to get to their house and they're coming from Duck Sanford Park, they're gonna have to turn left in the turn lane at Annaloo and go down Annaloo and then cut up. They'll be forced to use a turn lane. Correct, city engineer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the folks, we do have collisions at Annaloo pretty frequently in East University Drive. Now, you can say, why are we doing this project when the airport changes are gonna cause the cut through to Opelika to close? Country Club Road will be closing in the next year. And the city engineer and I had many discussions about that, and she still feels very strongly, she's very persuasive, that we should do this project because the condition of Annaloo is not gonna change, and it's pretty heavily traversed, and we're having collisions there anyway. And I'll mind you, some people do go to the high school this way, and other ways they still drive around that way to align with that intersection. So she felt pretty strong about it, made a compelling argument to keep it in. It's quite compelling, as a matter of fact.
Megan, ultimately, what will happen to the Sagahatchee Road that we're abandoning?
So we're taking that out right now, and yes, it's half done and needs to be finished. We got busy with other things. The triangle in the middle is owned by E.L. Spencer, and that's not really been a very viable parcel with the road configuration that way. It makes it more viable. There is a lot of interest in that. And our choice is either to keep that, it's shown green there as a pedestrian bicycle way, because remember, around the airport, and Councilman Griswold's had this question, around the runway extension, there will be a bike lane that goes up and around it. That's, not gonna be like a high-speed one, but it'll get you around it. So that's not been decided. It's either that or we can close it and abandon the property. If we do that, half would go to the Spencer property and half would likely go to the golf course property, which is in essence on 50-50 with Opelika. So that's just not been determined at this stage. But it needs to finish its demolition because it's not very pretty. But it will not reopen again to vehicular traffic. It makes no sense.
As the manager mentioned, and I guess I should have had this slide right behind the resurfacing, but the Biggerstaff Street resurfacing, proposing to resurface that street from Holmes Avenue to Zellers. So what we do with our part of the HUD money we get each year is set aside $100,000 or more to resurfacing infrastructure, other infrastructure improvements through our block grant program. So Al Davis does a really good job of working with the city engineer to try to help identify where the best needs are and best fits are for that project. So that will be funded, and this is over and above the monies that we spend out of our general fund for resurfacing in our streets in Auburn. Beehive Road, full depth reclamation. That's a pretty interesting buzzword.
Yeah.
If you have any more details on that, I'll allow the city engineer to answer that. But the proposal would be to approximately Wilmore Lane to near the West Tech Lane. Just go through here and rehab this
Okay.
section of the street.
It's going further. You want to, city engineer?
Yeah, so it actually
East,
starts
yeah.
east of West Tech Lane at the bridge that the countywide, a little bit that way.
Yeah, there you go.
Over the hill, yes.
Okay.
If you drive that, it's flat out embarrassment right now, and it's not a city street. It's owned by the county. So when you drive out on Beehive Road, Lee Road 10 there, it is rough. And we're working with the county, and part of this is, we work with them. Gosh, Phil, was it $800,000 we spent to help replace the bridge there when we built the tech park? And to widen that road at the time, the county did a lot of the work on the road widening, and we paid materials. But this road it's heavily traveled with heavy trucks, less industrial and more from other operations that are in and around it. I mean, M&M Materials is nearby, D&J, all kinds of things. Our own trucks are going to be traversing this a good bit for environmental services and public works, and it needs to be fixed. And from a front door perspective, recruiting industry, it's a little embarrassing at the shape that it's in, or a lot embarrassing.
So the interstate bridge for,
Yeah.
down here, we're not moving it all the way to the interstate bridge?
No, well, no, not this project, not yet.
Correct.
More needs to be done, agreed. We're working on that. Yeah, it is. We agree with you. And we could be back to you in the next fiscal year trying to do more.
And we partnered with the county to do some other patchwork in this area over the past few years, so it's time to do something. No, we're looking at something and then looking at some technology here that will allow us to do this very economically. Mooresville Road, Society Hill Road roundabout. This is a project the city engineer's been working closely with the county engineer on, and you know, we're asking you to commit $500,000 towards this project. The county will pick up the remainder of the amount. If you've been out in this area, you will notice that the county did go ahead and put in turn lanes, right turn lanes at this intersection, and so the roundabout would then come in.
That's Lazy B down here, that's
That's
all.
what Lazy B.
Right.
Is that construction date their timeline?
I didn't hear the question.
Is that fiscal year 24 the county's timeline?
Yes, they're still working on the design.
Okay.
The turn lanes actually are a precursor to the final roundabout.
Okay.
We had initially hoped that they could perform the work themselves and it would be sooner, and they felt that this is a little more than their expertise. So also want to remind you, our Society Hill Park property, Scott, can you point out where that is? No? Over there. Yep. And that is a massive piece of property. We also have 4 slated for baseball, softball, multi-purpose fields, but not in this 6-year window.
Northeast school.
Huh?
Northeast school.
Oh, which one's Lazy B? I was opposite on Lazy B, sorry.
Lazy B.
Yep, you're right. Sorry, I was opposite on that myself.
There's already a stoplight there. Is it a flashing light or a stoplight?
Four-way stop.
Four-way stop. All right.
North College Street, Drake Avenue, Gay Street intersection improvements. Pretty extensive projects. It sort of mirrors what we're doing now at Sanford, South College, as far as the number of intersections that we're impacting here. This will add turn lanes on Drake, on the college, roundabout at the intersection of Gay and Drake. New sidewalks extending out through here, and as you can see, the extent of this has been outlined in blue.
Are you allowed to call that a roundabout?
It's oval about. You can see though the massive amount of sidewalks, the blue lines going up. That's the developers paid for a good bit of that. We're connecting. A lot of you have asked, both Councilwoman Witten and Councilman Griswold, because it crosses what their former wards look like. Now it's all in Ward 2, asking about sidewalk connections, and this finally makes those. The city engineer was willing to do these as 2 separate projects, and it was the city manager that said if we're going to create pain in the area, let's just do it at once. If we do 2 separate projects, we're going to finish one and then tear up the next intersection and make everybody even more angry when we do that. So they're together.
Will there be any, the line of sight coming Drake to College, it dips pretty well, which I think is one of the reasons why people run those lights. Will there be any grading for there, or is it just gonna stay?
Our preliminary analysis does not include a grade adjustment,
Okay.
but that's something we definitely can look at as we start a real design.
So moving on, we'll highlight this project. We talked about the exit 50 lighting and landscaping project. That project is well underway. And this is a project at exit 57 that's proposed to be done in this biennium. And so this is actually shared cost with the city contributing 20%, just like the project at exit 50. And it'll highly improve landscape in this area, lighting to promote safety as well as the appearance to this very important gateway into Auburn. So I'm gonna transition to capital outlay. I'm not gonna hit on every project, but you can turn to 140 in your manual. This manual's budget document.
You can tell he's an engineer.
Can we back up just a second?
Sure.
The
Yeah.
Sidewalk stuff,
Which is,
the sidewalk,
This one?
listing, yeah.
Oh, we don't have, you mean in the book?
So what, yeah, 146, we talked, what the first thing you talked about was neighborhood and sidewalk project. The additional stuff that Councilwoman Taylor and I asked for, is that?
No, it's not reflected in here. There are things like making these connections where this is, in our sidewalk policy, the goal is to make connections. It is nice to do neighborhood sidewalks, but we have limited financial and staff ability to do that. So why is the Camden Ridge sidewalk not done? Because we have to bid it. Nobody wants to bid our sidewalks. So then we have to build them ourselves, and then we don't have capacity to do aspects of it. So sidewalk projects are very challenging. When they go into intersection projects, we can get them done because the bid is big enough. To build through, you'll see them in the latter years, but a lot of these that are in here now are obligations of development agreements or other things are trying to make connections. Other than Camden Ridge, and you'll see in the latter years, you see a lot coming in different areas of town. But right now, at the time that we're starting this budget, we've got a lot of money into making other connections on major arterials to make walking easier. And so no, we don't have a lot of neighborhood sidewalks in this current biennium. That could change depending on where revenue goes and where our time goes, but right now, they're not in.
If we want them in, what do we have to do?
If you want them in, then we need to take some things out and shift around. And if, things like this project, we don't have to do this project. We can shift these funds if you want to neighborhood sidewalks. One of the challenges is I stood before you, or actually talked to you on Zoom 2 years ago and told you we were going to do Camden Ridge, and it's not done. And that's because we can do half of it ourselves and we have to bid the other half. We don't have the equipment nor ability to do part of it because it's got some challenges. So the Mooresville sidewalk was nothing short of a miracle when we finally found somebody to bid that.
What year did we implement the policy that a sidewalk had to be constructed
In the subdivision regulations?
1998.
Yeah, and that's always, I say it a lot, and I say it again, is yeah, in the new neighborhoods that have them, it's because they were required.
Right.
The long-established neighborhoods that don't have them, by and large, were not built by developers, they were built by the city. The other thing that we need to remember is we used to get a lot of grant funding for sidewalk connections, and there is no such money at this time. But we do have a priority on routes to school and shopping areas, places of worship, etc. And so a lot of that is collector road and arterial road oriented, like Councilman Griswold was asking for the Cedarbrook North connection. Well, he's referring to Cedarbrook, North Cedarbrook, all the way to the College and East University Drive intersection, and then a way to cross. And that would force us to build a sidewalk across a bridge, a creek bridge, and then down East University Drive and then across at another thing, and we just haven't, that's not been a priority of us for a connection across a 5-lane high-speed road, is why that hasn't been made. What?
I'm not talking about crossing.
No, you did not. Some citizens in your ward are asking for that. He's only asking to get to a certain point at North College Street, absolutely. But we're getting some push from some folks. Just the same as you got a number of folks, you voted as a council not to have Owens Road connect through some townhouses because citizens by and large in that area did not want a connection. Some citizens did ask you for a pedestrian connection. The vote that night was no road connection, and there was no other requirement for it to connect, so therefore it does not connect. And there is not a way through there at this stage that we have the authority to make it go through HOA property. We don't. So now there is no connection, and folks that live there can't go to Wilbin Parkway because that's a state highway. They have to go down in the neighborhood and over, and then go to Donahue and then go up the sidewalk that way. And yes, Cary Woods does not have a sidewalk, and that's a neighborhood that's long been asking for it. It's a $2 million undertaking, and we've got to chop up everybody's front yard and take out trees and put retaining walls and do other things. And we can do that. If that's a priority of the council as a whole, then we can shift the budget priority and do that. But When you start cutting people's trees down, you can ask the staff, the Moore's Mill sidewalk in the older section of Moore's Mill was quite a challenge to get done. It took many years to acquire the right-of-way, and we fortunately had a wider right-of-way there. But those are things we can do, but you have to, if that's what you want to do, then I can recommend other things to come out. And right now, traffic was your highest, so I went with traffic improvements that also included sidewalks typically.
So capital outlay again, capital outlay is outlined beginning on page 140. And I want to touch on some of the priorities that are in the business unit for 23. Again, the list is more extensive than that. This is in the budget document. So one is Boykin Auditorium stage curtain. Talked with Al Davis about this. The Boykin Community Center is very heavily used, and this seemed to be an important project because obviously when we're having meetings in there, it's good to keep the curtain closed. That way it cuts down on some of the vibrations and noises in there in the background and stuff. Well, when someone's having some kind of skit or something in there, you want to open the curtains. The problem is those curtains have been in there maybe as long as last time the auditorium was renovated. Larry, you may remember. I think you said you went to school. So that is a project that we have in there to make that replacement. The city's been investing a lot in rehabbing and taking care of this historic school within our community, and we'll continue to keep it functional and operational. Rapid flashing beacons for pedestrian crossings, we have that in FY 23 and 24 as the engineering department continues to work in installing these around the city at some of our mid-block crossings, and particularly in the downtown area. Downtown parking kiosk, need to replace all of our downtown parking kiosks, go with a new vendor. It'll help mitigate some issues we're having with our current situation. It is a pretty significant cost, but it's well worth the investment for what issues we've had to deal with.
A number of you have sent me messages you've had from constituents or seen on social media. We're having a lot of problems with the old kiosk visibility, so on. Our IT department and then Kevin, our commercial development director, have really taken this on and taken a hard look at it. And the new kiosks you see at Auburn Bank and down by the AU Hotel parking deck and so on are the newer one. And Greg, they're working much better.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're a lot actually less expensive than we paid the initial investment. Also, the number of them that we're putting fewer than we currently have, and some of these will also be in areas we don't have. We're trying to get a kiosk everywhere that we don't because it's confusing in downtown. And so that also, Kevin, that picks up a number of them that we don't currently have also, right?
Correct. As you probably know now, there are a couple of areas where we're definitely oversaturated with kiosks. And there are other areas like College Street, for example, kind of right outside the door here. We really don't have any kiosks at all. We have one. So really getting a little bit better distribution with those, as well as replacing them with these new kiosks that certainly hold up a lot better, easier to use, and in our experience so far have held up much better and require much less maintenance.
Is that something that would happen all at one time, or like as they come in? And the reason for my question is if they come all in at one time, are we gonna suspend parking fees for that period of time to keep people from being confused?
I think it's something we can certainly phase in, and then, the addition of Park Mobile as well, that gives people another alternative to be able to pay that way.
Yeah, I think we'll be flexible on it as we can. We're trying to get this in because there's a mad dash to Titchener Avenue to leave your car there as long as possible and not pay. Now, I watch people all day, they rotate their car into spaces on Titchener, and they rotate them with other employees from the same establishment, including people who have passes in the parking deck, and they still park there. And so we're trying to deter some of that to get people who are paying for monthly spaces in their monthly. And if you're hourly, you need to be in the hourly spaces or go to the Wright Street or Burton Street deck.
Another project, you should remember a few weeks ago, you passed a contract for an engineer to design new HVAC systems for our Boykin, Dean Road, and Frank Brown gymnasiums. So we've got in your capital outlay proposed spending over $960,000 for that equipment. That's totally funded through the Recovery Act money, as the city manager previously mentioned, and so that's in there, a significant project for us to have in this biennium. The only, whoa, there you go. I thought that was me. The only thing I hadn't mentioned in FY24, I do want to highlight the Boykin Gymnasium basketball goal hoops. Just again, that's some aged assets that need to be updated, so that's in this coming budget. All right, so I want to get back to transition back into CIP, and so we're going to talk Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Master Plan now. So I'm going to kick this off a little bit and talk about, but you might want to flip to 147, page 147, and go through the list. But I'm going to kick it off with the Boykin Donahue campus.
Real quick, Scott, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Taylor had to leave, but this is what I was alluding to earlier to explain Boykin. So, go ahead.
So what we have in the project, and I know you've probably seen this rendering or something similar to it for some time. This was an early concept site plan that we had, began work on. Our consultants have pounded on this for a while and come up with some new plans. So we're a lot further along. We've got some really good cost estimates now. We've got good plans. We're about 60% design, I think.
Almost 60.
So, and the 60% design for pretty much all the components in the project. So what we're proposing to fund, and I'm going to give you the big overview, and then we're going to dive into a little more detail to look at what those particular components are. What we're particularly planning on funding this year would be a total of a little over $27 million, and over $10 million, nearly $11 million of that will be funded through the Recovery Act money. And again, as Public Works and Environmental Services relocate to their new campus on Wire Road, we'll be able to repurpose this facility. It'll be a really top-notch recreational, cultural resource and center for adjacent to the Boykin Community Center. So it'll be a great complement to that, in addition to great service in the Northwest Auburn neighborhood. The project was envisioned in the Parks and Recreation and Cultural Master Plan. And so it's really cool to be able to start seeing some of those, begin to be implemented. So in a little more detail, diving in a little closer, this is a more recent site plan. It ain't got all the pretty colors on there. This is more engineering kind of thing. So, but this is the most recent site plan that we have that we're working off of. The initial phase that we're proposing will include site development. So the site development will also, in addition to just grading the site, building the sidewalks, building the pads, it'll include the walking trails as well as relocating the recycling center across the street to this area where the facility is currently housed. The Cultural Resource Center, this is is proposed in this area right here, right next to the library, but so that's sitting in this area. The Boykin Library would be sitting here, and the splash pad is in this vicinity. Again, the walking trails would all be part of this first initial phase. So everything that's on here, except for the gymnasium, would be in this first phase. And this is where the current location would be for ultimate future pool.
You're seeing some capital expenses a little higher than you would expect. Some of that is because design is in those numbers, and design sometimes doesn't end up in what the construction costs are, and that gets confusing to everyone. So that also includes design numbers allocated across. And again, if you add the gym, we're talking about another $20 million to the project. That is why I didn't recommend it in this phase.
What comes with the gym?
So very similar to what you're gonna hear about Lake Wilmore, and Becky is gonna hit me if I get it wrong. The 2 full-size basketball courts, 4 small courts, they can be flipped. Walking track around the interior on the 2nd floor, a fitness facility, and some classrooms up there to teach, like, Zumba or whatever. And then in the lower level, you can see out to the right, there's a little swing out to the far right of the building. There's some meeting space and lobby area in that. That's what we're not getting. So Lake Wilmore Gym is almost identical, and Keith's going to talk about that shortly in terms of the same delivery of things.
And Scott, did I hear you say there is room or plans for a pool at some point?
That's in this area.
Okay.
It's grayed out because it hasn't been with the plan. We've already got it, was in the darker colors, including the gymnasium, is well over $50 million.
Like $55 million for the whole campus without the pools. That's where we land on that right now.
We'll transition over. We can talk a little bit more about parking.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. For those that don't know, I'm Keith Williams. I'm the Public Services Executive Director, and I'm extremely excited to be here to share with you my one cumulative month of information I've gathered by being in the city of Auburn. So, with all due respect and full credit, everything right on here really should go out to the directors that did the hard work for this. So, thank you very much. So, I'm going to going over some Parks and Rec Master Plan projects. And the first one is the library public restrooms ADA compliance project, which involves basically essentially the gutting of the existing restrooms in the building to bring them up in compliance with the Americans with Disability Act. It's something that's been brought up a number of times to our staff, so we want to move this forward with the upcoming fiscal year. Moving on, Lake Wilmore Community Center. As the city manager so eloquently put, this property and the next 2 projects that I mentioned are the 2 best poised really to address the needs that the community has relative to our parks and recreation. Those key points being gymnasium space, swimming pool opportunities, and then multi-purpose fields that you're going to see on the next capital project. So this community center includes 2 full-size basketball courts that, as she mentioned, can be flipped to 4 smaller courts, locker rooms and restrooms, 2 activity rooms, a fitness room with equipment, 2 multi-use / fitness rooms, an elevated indoor walking track that you see rendered there, multi-use area, office and storage space, a 0-entry pool featuring shallow areas for lessons in water aerobics, and a lap pool. And both those pool facilities will be heated and have the ability to be covered for wintertime use, which is again something that's been addressing some of the requests from the community.
Just real quick, Becky, on the therapeutic side, that addresses the main concerns brought up in the community. That's what, based on the things that you were hearing when the Health Plus pool closed, the 0-entry corrects that. And
yes, the ability to have water aerobics and be able to walk in the water and be able to have a lap swim and for it to be heated.
that's why you can kind of see the separation between the 2, kind of with the lifeguard chair on it. The 0-entry is closest to us.
So during the fall and winter, there would be a cover? Okay.
That is correct, sir.
Covered, it will be heated. Now, get back, you heard much about the temperature. There's a compromise on the temperature in terms of it will be somewhere in between what they wanted and where it's going to be, right, Becky? It's not going to be at 90 or whatever.
85.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can have all that done by the end of fiscal year 23?
Well, this project is at 90% design when it was postponed in 2020, so it's essentially ready to be bid. And it's the closest one we have is a shovel-ready project for some of the major master projects.
Yeah, I think you're correct about that. I've already had this discussion with the city engineer. We should be out to bid no later than the start of the fiscal year, just because we're still making a few adjustments due to the pool. With this, the fields is a totally separate project. Facilities do build faster, but it could be a 12 to 18 month construction, reality speaking. We'll see how many bidders we get and how it goes.
Yeah, I'm worried about people hanging their hat on that.
I agree with you. The goal would be to have the gym space open in the 24-25 winter season.
Calendar year.
Correct. Well, really, ultimately, you start building the fall of 22, that's fiscal 23, and we get into winter 23 would not be open, winter 24 it will be open. And that is just to make it fun, like.
That's just the chill part.
And
Well,
piggybacking
Jim
off of that,
Cruiser should be, yeah, right.
sorry, piggybacking off of that site, for the following fiscal year is the Lake Wilmore multi-purpose fields, they see, which would be adjacent to the community center that I just discussed. Again, ticking off that kind of third check mark between gymnasium space, pool space, and now multi-purpose fields. These fields would be designed and arranged to be able to host soccer, lacrosse, football games and practices, as well as baseball and softball practices. The scope also includes field lighting, a restroom with storage areas, parking, as well as space dedicated for mobile concessions or food trucks.
I noticed on our pretty drawings that we have lots of trees, which I love. I'm going to interject my wish and wants for fruit trees in all of our parks and rec plans. I just feel compelled that we should start planting some fruit trees. I'm just going to put that out there for the world to consume.
You got it.
Probably the first we've ever heard of fruit trees. I like it.
It is not.
And no, this is not the first staff has heard of it. And also, Keith, you may have touched on this. These are slated right now to be a turf, artificial turf product, and could be bid it as an alternate for natural grass. So because of the amount of play that goes on these fields, that's part of the reason for the price tag. We're also looking at ways right now to get cost out. Maybe we don't pave the parking lots. Maybe we don't do other things. We're looking at all that. We've got this part of this fiscal year 23 upcoming to figure that out and to get out the bid as quickly as possible.
Where are the red dotted lines in the middle between the two sets of fields?
That's the gas easement that runs through the property.
It's nice for walking.
Following project is the Saugatuck Blueway Greenway Phase 1A that is scheduled for fiscal year 23. This is just Phase 1A, so it involves a 9/10 of a mile walking path. It's a hard surface path that will run from Donahue to the rear of the Auburn Farms subdivision property, as well as a put-in and a takeout for the Blueway canoe kayak access. The put-in would be adjacent to Donahue. The takeout would be near the terminus of Richland Road, near the wastewater treatment facility.
You want to show where that is? Down at the bottom.
Yeah, sorry. So this is the end of Richland Road right here. So you have the Cotswold subdivision through here. This is the wastewater treatment plant. Be an access road with parking and the takeout from the creek there.
And then the Donahue's on the put in on the top.
That's correct. So this is Donahue. This would be a restroom facility. This would be the walking path, the turnaround. Future phases would lead further to the west, and that would be the put in for the stream as well.
Part of this project is in this area, we're just way underserved with any recreational opportunities. And there were a lot of questions from this council about why it was removed during COVID. And we also didn't have some pricing finalized and so on. And the reason it's in also in part is we are limited in our recreational opportunities. We've had a lot of requests for this, and so that's why it's in.
That Donahue and then where it feeds up, is that Miracle?
That is the abandoned section of it, yeah. It will go as far as that parking lot, and then the rest is a private drive. Because, you know, we relocated to Jamesburg Parkway. Is that the right name, Miles?
Yes, yes, sir.
So what is that weird building that they put in the middle of nowhere?
It's I think, Steve, it's an office building, I think, for the developer. The building they're building in the
Woodward Oaks area.
At Woodward Oaks.
I'm not sure.
Okay. I think it's an office building or something.
Yeah, it's just random. Okay.
Have all the right of ways been required for this?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes, it has.
Following project is the renovations of Jan Dempsey Community Arts Center. Current center is proposed about 8,000 square feet, addition to accommodate additional class space, as well as renovations to existing space, including some of the back areas, office, as well as restrooms that are in dire need of update, as well as some additional work relative to the auditorium and performance areas.
This big, this relocation, you're welcome to have all the discussion you want. I also put it in because therapeutics is a big demand in our community. Ceramics is taking up much space at Dean Road. We also are woefully short on programming space for Camp Kaleidoscope and other things going on now. And by relocating some of that stuff out of Dean Road, it's opening up space. It didn't rank well in your overall priorities, and I understand that. But it's also long been on the first tranche of Parks and Recreation and Cultural Master Plan projects that we were supposed to get done in the initial tranche. So it also has been somewhat of a COVID victim, as well as some bidding expenses, because we already did bid this once. And we rejected all the bids. And so I'm bringing it back forward again. That is up to you. These are the reasons that it's in, and that's up to you. It's $5 million. But we have other moving parts with this. The ADA is a big piece of that, and then it has to do also with creating beyond the arts expansions that are needed and recommended. We have a lot of moving parts with Dean Road Recreation Center opening that up for other programming.
Megan, I presume that the Parks and Rec Advisory Board still believes this is a important project?
Yes, Becky. They addressed it in the memo when you get a chance to read it. That's in there. That's why I wanted to include that with this, so you guys can read what those boards had to say.
One of the key issues is that we have been able to address a lot of facility ADA needs in-house, but the work there is way over our head. It's going to have to be contractor work.
So much smaller scope, but still equally important benefit of the citizens. This is the Margie Piper Bailey Field renovations. A budget of $170,000 to smooth and re-sod, as well as repair irrigation and add fencing to a current play field utilized by the residents and citizens.
We're trying to maximize use of existing facilities and improve play. And this needs, if you ever go by here, it's often a lake with different ponding mud holes. So a little bit of money will fix this and make it more playable year-round, and it is used year-round, heavily.
It's used year-round for our programming and just casual play with citizens.
In the schools, and yeah, I see there's, there's casual play out there all the time, mainly parents and children practicing. There's formal practice. You go by there in baseball season, every corner of it has little baseball teams on it. Soccer is played. You see football out there. You see a lot of pickup sports. And what happens is it turns very muddy in the rainy season, and it gets ruined by play when play shouldn't happen. We had a few people get on it a little over a year ago, and it was closed for a long time. So we're getting on there. We want to address these things because we need to maximize play on the facilities we do have constantly. We need to think with that lens to maximize availability for our citizens. And remember, all this coincides too with our online reservation system that's going live for fields and other things, where teams that want to practice, that are club teams or other things, are going to be able to reserve through an online system and a smoother system. We're trying to really maximize availability of the facilities that we have.
And following up, also Town Creek and Westview Cemetery columbariums. Each one is proposed to receive some. Town Creek Cemetery is proposed for 2 columbariums. The current one in place is almost completely booked and sold out, as well as Westview proposal for 1 columbarium. It currently has 0 there to add to that facility.
We discussed that with Connie. I had in a different meeting, and she was very excited about that possibility. And the cemetery business, unfortunately, has been quite robust for us, and it's an unfortunate thing. But we're selling a lot of plots right now, and we are, Becky will have some numbers for you on Wednesday about how many burials, et cetera, are going on.
So moving on, similar to what Scott presented, discussing capital outlay within public services. It won't be a comprehensive list, but again, you can find it on page 140 of your booklets. It hits some high points for fiscal year 23. We're looking at for public works, a tractor with bush hogs to continue to improve the overall appearance and maintenance of the right-of-ways. An excavator for public works and asphalt crack sealer. Again, we just discussed resurfacing the importance of maintaining our roadways here in Auburn. The van for the library, I think Tyler would go on the record discussing our outreach programs and how much we're trying to do just outside the limits and boundaries of the existing library facility, as well as a mini excavator for Parks and Recreations that will actually be focused on working within the cemeteries with the need to do excavation there, as well as a tractor and dump truck for Parks and Recreation and a jetter truck for our sewer department in fiscal year 23. Following up on 24, 2 dump trucks for Public Works, a backhoe for Parks and Recreation, a skid steer for sewer, and then a 28-yard side load recycling truck for environmental services. So again, to continue to work on keeping our rolling stock at upkeep and taken care of.
There's also 2 recycling trucks, I think, in 23.
That's
also
correct, there are.
Environmental services.
All right. Well, that concludes my portion. I'm going to hand it over to.
We're gonna have Paul
Executive
do
Director of
his,
Public Safety.
and unless you guys wanna carry on after that, I think that the judge and the economic development director will hunt to Wednesday. They're excited, look at them, Philip's really excited.
The solid waste management fund purchase the vehicles for recycling and dumping,
Yeah, you would approve them in a purchase, but it comes through that fund, yeah,
so it's not out of general fund.
correct.
All right.
But again, you'll see all of those when they hit the agenda. All right, Paul?
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. I really appreciate being able to come up today and talk about some of the projects that we have and hopefully coming on board for public safety. First, I want to thank you for the projects that we've had most recently. We've benefited greatly over the last several years from our public safety facility. Fire Station 6 should be completed within the next month or so. And then I guess I'll go out of order because I do want to talk about currently you guys have approved and funded this phase 1 for the Public Safety Training Center, which is going to be, if you'll look on this is North College and Highway 280. That's the location, the old rest area, for many of you that don't know. Allison and her staff have done a great job of keeping this on task, and it is basically finished. You can see the paved road that goes all the way around it. So we are now ready to begin phase 2, which would be placing the Public Safety Training Center in this front area here, facing Highway 280. As you've heard others mention about the gateway of the city, this will be another one of those spots. When you come up Highway 280, this will be one of the first things that you see when you come into our community. You can look at it similarly like it would be a platform, much like the Station 6. It would be a very good footprint to compare it to. So you'll see that as you come into the city of Auburn on Highway 280. So as far as the training center itself, a little bit about the need. Chief Langford, I guess over the last 5 years, his staff have trained more firefighter recruits than the cities of Prattville, Opelika, Phoenix City, and Dothan put together. So we have, because of our student firefighters, they've done a great job of training recruits. This facility is going to give them the ability to have, for those 4 months, these recruits out there in a place where they'll have them able to train there. Additionally, this is a multi-purpose facility. Our police department will be able to use it as well. We expect there to be a couple of classrooms out there, 2 larger classrooms. We'll have training going on at both times. So the police will be able to use that for that as well. We're looking at this to be about a 12,000 square foot building, somewhere between 10 and 12,000. Much like I said, Fire Station 6. We'll have continuing education. We'll use this as a regional training area too, where other police departments and fire departments can come here and train. As far as the exterior of it, you'll have things, other components that will be coming online later in other phases. But the track that you see around there that goes around it, it will be so that the police department can do their physical fitness training for recruits to see if they can make the cut or not to be hired. Same thing with fire. You'll see later that these other components are in there. Even down the road, we have some potential for other things that will happen out here. We'll talk about a project that's coming up in here later about a radio tower. Eventually, there might be a 3rd tower that would go with our system that would be in this spot as well. So it serves some future purposes and not just what we're using it for now. So a great...
I think, Paul, you maybe were going to mention this. This also can serve as a polling location. You've heard much about that. They can serve as a polling location at some point in the future, and that one of the reasons where this is in the CIP is to try to get it done for the 24 presidential election, which this is a small enough building, it should be accomplished in time to do that. And so that would be very helpful in that vicinity of town where we have nothing.
Do we have an indoor pistol range for police officers now?
We do not. We have a range that is out in Wilmore.
We're going to talk about the range.
I'll show you that in just a few minutes. We have a project for that. We do not have an indoor range right now.
Okay, is the Beauregard project, did it include an indoor range?
Not at this point. It's not for an indoor range.
Is there a specific reason you didn't want to do one in this project?
Well, we're trying to keep the firearms qualifications and all that at the location out there. We do have additional room on that site where we would expand for years to come.
Into that side.
Yes, and we'll have that probably stay out there as far as the firearms part of it.
Okay, and the current burn building, is that thing that's on Sugar to the?
Yes.
It is.
You see it near the, okay, go ahead.
Yes, and there is a little bit of life usefulness out of that. Chief Langford, how much longer do we have with that? A couple of years, maybe 2 to 5 years?
I think we could use it for 5 to 6 more years.
And you see in the CIP where it enters in the latter years, we're doing some improvements, and then you get into the next 4-year cycle, and it would finish out the rest.
Is there space for a water tower?
There is, and Paul can show you, and Eric Carson is here to speak to that as well.
Yes, we're looking at it hard. Yeah, back on the back corner back here, that is some of that additional future use potentially for a water tower there. We've talked with Eric and his staff about that. We do see that as a potential use later down the road.
And it's nice because this property was given to us by Alabama Department of Transportation, and so that is nice. We don't have any money in the property other than improvements.
It may be a little early, but is it fair that we could, down the road, consider this a revenue stream? And instead of sending firefighters to Tuscaloosa, we can, as part of this regional training facility?
That is the goal. Megan mentioned earlier about increasing some training funding for specifically the police department. You know, we hope that at this location, we can bring instructors here and hold larger classes and, you know, charge maybe some fees for some of that and get some of this money back. And so we do plan on using that as a site for that.
Opelika is doing update to their facility with that in mind as well for revenue streams. So there's some competition next door.
This would be prettier than the junkyard.
Oh, yeah.
Well, speaking of the competition, we'll go with that. So one of the things that we do not have currently is a drill tower. And so what this is able to use for the recruits and firefighters, they can practice using a multi-level structure when they're learning how to fight fires and you know, using water and so forth to do these things. This will be an elevation for them to do that with high-rise ability and practice that in a real-life situation. We don't have that now. We use some other people's, but they don't have anything similar to this. So this will be something that we really need as we grow as a community, taller buildings and so forth. This will help us a lot. We can also use it for search and rescue, rappelling. They can use that for rappelling there, doing search and rescue training. It has multi-purpose for the police department as well. They can practice using these stairs for doing clearing, tactical maneuvers, and also rappelling from this top of this tower too. So a lot of uses for this. This will be in 23 and $345,000. And this will be more of a, Chief Langford, will this be more of a modular that could be done within a year?
I would think so, yes.
Okay.
A number of these things too are applying for federal funding for these. If we're able to get those federal funds, then this will come off the general fund and become grant funded. Anything that out here, a lot of this is eligible, so we're gonna keep trying.
I didn't mean to say that in this project here, it says $3 million, but there's actually $500,000 in 23 and then $2.5 million in 24 to get the project through. That's how that will be. That's how that will carry through. And then you mentioned, Councilman Griswold, you mentioned the firearms range. If you look at this top image here, that is the old berm that's in the very back of it. After 25 or 30 years, that is really in need of repair. There used to be a center wall here that was built out of wood and filled with sand. That had to be abandoned probably 15 years ago. And now this project, we talked with Dan Ballard and his staff, as well as engineering, working together to come up with a plan for this. And so we think we'll have a berm, a dirt berm here, and then this dirt will be reworked and lead reclamation from this site here. And then this road here will be redone, you know, surfaced and topped. So that should get this site where we can move forward for many years. It's probably not had any work done to it probably for 20 years, I would say. That sound about right, Will? 20 years?
Yes.
Okay. That cost would be about $106,000. And I'll talk more in a little bit about the moving target system when we get down to a further slide. And we do have some drainage issues out there. And so down at the bottom here, we'll be able to take up this sidewalk here and rework this dirt here and get all the dirt or the water running down into this area. And that water issue has led to the issue that we've had with the moving target system on the back of this site. So capital outlay, we'll look at page 140 in your book for that. Will be the capital. We'll talk about some major things in capital outlay. I don't know that I'll go through every item.
He's got the mother of all capital outlay items. Always surprised the business unit does on the highest cost one by a long shot.
Thank you for that introduction.
There you go.
No shock here. So the fire department has a great replacement plan that we work with Fleet Services. Ladder trucks, we try to keep those 20 years. We are at 20 years with the current ladder truck that we have now. So that truck that we have has about 10,000 hours on it, which when you equate it to miles, it's about 450,000 miles. Now, the actual odometer is not that, but the actual engine running time is about 450,000 miles that we would have on there for that. So we will be recycling out one of the trucks and then purchasing a ladder truck. And this ladder truck specifically is an aerial, it's called a tiller truck. And what these do, if you don't mind, Stephen, show this. If you'll look at the bottom slide there, as our city has grown, we're using roundabouts now. And so some of them in the smaller neighborhoods would be a little bit of a challenge for some of the ladder trucks. So this truck, a tiller, will be able to make that tight turn because you have an operator in the back, turning the truck.
Jay.
We had that in the 90s.
Yes.
We did have one years ago. So
Didn't have a nice convenient cab in the back.
yeah, a little nicer. This truck would also have about a 100-foot ladder to use on developments that we have, so a little longer ladder capacity, just more reliable, increased safety. The cost of this is $1.6 million. We look back, the last time we bought a ladder truck was about $800,000, but that was probably, how many years ago, Chief Langford?
2007.
2007. So since 2007, we're at 1.6 now on a ladder truck. So that is something that, what we will do is we will buy this ladder truck. The oldest ladder truck will cycle out, and the current ladder truck at Station 1 will be moved to a reserve to cover the truck that's being cycled out that has so many hours on it.
And Paul, it'll take us about how long to get this truck?
2 years, Chief Langford?
2 years.
Yeah,
2 years
it'll be a
lead
while.
time on this truck. So
And where will this one live?
it will be at Station 1, the main station. So 2 years ought to make you feel a little better about it.
You can drive, you can be the tiller driver if you want. It's, Stephen, you might have to help them advance it.
Yes, that's right.
There you go.
So one of the things that you'll see later in here is there's some things about capital outlay where we're purchasing some medical equipment, mainly heart monitors. One of the things that we feel strongly about, Chief Langford, his staff, and I agree, we feel like we need to provide more enhanced medical service as a first responder group to our citizens. And the way we feel like doing that is we want to add advanced life support services to our fire engines, but also we want to purchase a rescue truck like this that has the ability in rare instances.
It is a 22 purchase not showing up in there. We'll explain in a minute. Okay, go ahead.
Yep. So we will purchase this, and then some of the stuff that you'll see in there, the heart monitor, those things, would be used for this vehicle. This is a 2018 that we will be buying potentially from the City of Smith Station. Why would you ask when you're looking at 2018? Just as you have a lead time for fire trucks, you have about a 1.5 year lead time for these. We felt like this is an emergent need. We don't want to tell you it's emergent and then tell you we can wait a 1.5 years to get a truck. So we felt like this is a good way to get into the business. We've looked at this truck, our facilities, our fleet has looked at it. It should be a good way for us to get in this business.
It is likely you're seeing it on June 21st. It's moving that fast. I think it's key is the advanced life support means we have the ability to transport, but we're not in the ambulance business. That's what the hospital does. But in the event we have a big accident on the interstate, major things going on, or the other transport services in the area are tied up with other patients or other things, if we must, we can.
It is supplemental. There are days where we may have 4, 5, 6 medical calls early in the morning. The hospital does a great job responding to these calls, but there are just those times when the volume is so much that we would need to have the ability to do this, and we don't want to not be able to have that service for our citizens if we were to need it.
It will not be red and black. Once it arrives, it shall get painted quickly. John's going to put a bag over it somewhere and hide it. But you're likely to see things are moving quick because Smith Station is getting out of this business. And we have tried and tried and tried to find a used one, and they keep getting purchased before we can even make a move. Will send me an email, 5 minutes later they're gone. So you're likely to see this on June 21st. Smith Station's been gracious in their willingness to share it, to not share it, but to sell it to us. And we're very appreciative of that. It's in very good shape. And this gives us the ability to test this and see how this goes. It'll be at Station 1 also.
It will. Okay. So back a couple of years ago, you guys funded the P25 radio transition to the 700 megahertz units. When we did that, we utilized the tower behind the present police building. understanding that at some point we would need a build out of other towers when we had to develop this further. We are now in a position where Alabama Power will be building a tower on property adjacent to some IDB property on Corporate Parkway. So because of that, we have the ability to have space on this tower, which is right where we need it to be. We would increase our indoor coverage for our industry, but also our residential areas down there. We would increase indoor coverage for our radio system. From the very beginning, we knew that at some point we would need to have a build out of an additional tower on the south end, and possibly later on down the road at the north end, which would be at that public safety training center as well. So this would be, we would put our equipment on Alabama Power's tower.
Saving us a tremendous amount of money because they would build the tower, otherwise we'd be responsible for that too.
You just leave space on that?
Yeah.
Correct.
So this is mainly the capital outlay just for the equipment. We'll have a small lease, right, Will?
That's correct.
Yeah, on an annual, they'll end up in the public safety operating budget, but.
Didn't we have a conditional use request for a tower on the other side of the railroad tracks off Highway 13? Would that?
Oh, no, that one way at Wimberley Station, the one that you got right below that, you guys had, they ended up pulling the plug on that one.
Okay.
After you wanted, well, it was based on planning recommendations, you wanted it done differently, and I don't think they pursued that further.
Okay. So we've all seen around the country where we have to be better about hardening our facilities, hardening in our areas when we have events, downtown events. Just as it says, we have about at least 12 times a year when we close down the Tumors Corner area. A very safe area, we have a lot of folks down there, but we can always do more, and we feel like at this point it's time to do more. And so we've gone through a lot of research, several of us, about getting these portable, movable barricades that we would put down there and use. The reason we're using portable is the event determines which side of the intersection many times we close the road. Sometimes it's on the south side of Thatch, sometimes it's on the north side of Thatch. Sometimes it's on the east side of Gay, sometimes it's on the west. So this portable application will be a much better application for us to use. So depending on the event, we can move it to that location. These are relatively cost efficient and they're very effective. I will show you a video, but it does a lot of damage if you want to cover it. So.
And it allows us to get these in place in a hurry and out in a hurry, so we're trying to minimize time on street closures, but by keeping people as safe as possible.
We'll be spending $60,000 in '23, and then again $60,000 in '24. These come in 10-foot sections that we'll be able to put into place and take out of place before and after these events. So now I'll transition to capital outlay for some other items. So the item that I have shown here, Megan mentioned earlier some 3D equipment. The Detective Division for the Police Department uses what's called a total station now. That unit has been in use since 2007. And what that does is it does crime scene mapping at scenes like homicide, robbery, those more serious crimes. It's almost inoperable, it's outdated, and they really need a new piece of equipment. This piece of equipment, it is 3D, and it is what is almost expected now when you have these high-profile cases and testifying in court and trials. You see, it's the stuff you see on television with 3D imaging, but it also has the positioning and mapping of all the evidence that can be put in there, and it can recreate the crime scene. There's a lot of usefulness for this. So that is something that they really need to replace. That system is $32,000. I think we paid about 15 years ago, we paid about $15,000 for the total station. So just like everything else, that technology has increased. Going back through some other things, police, of course, has a vehicle replacement program with our fleet services. These vehicles are replaced. Typically, you're going to see more than about 120,000, 130,000 miles, but it's also the factor of the additional cost. The life of the year of the car, the 2-year service maintenance of the car. Those factors go into it. So the fleet size that they have, they're going to do 12 vehicles in 23. They would be doing 13, but the public safety admin, we're going to give them a admin vehicle that we have had for several years that has low mileage. We're going to use it for the detective division, and then we're going to experiment with a hybrid vehicle in public safety administration and just see how that goes. So
you're going to start seeing that in the fleet. We've got to address that over time, and one of the things they're doing is going to test one out and see what we think, if we're pushed in that direction, how's it performing? We did this 10 years ago, we still have some of those vehicles in service that are hybrids. We need to test some more to see if they're functional, are they saving us anything, the extra cost or not. This is the first one.
And then, of course, in fire, I mentioned earlier, the heart monitors for electrical. We're going to buy 2 of those in 23, and I believe 2 of them in 24. And the goal is to put them on the fire engines, and then also have it available for the rescue truck that we're purchasing as well. 24. Again, $60,000 for another round of those portable barricade systems. The police systems, the target systems repair. If you'll look at this image here, the berm that I showed you earlier with the holes in it where it had been shot, this is the back side of the wall that's down there, and that's a track. And over years, the water has just gone down in there and ruined that. So that system has to be repaired and replaced. And again, we should alleviate that problem by putting drainage down here in that $106,000 that we proposed for that to be fixed. So that would, and this is the actual moving target system. It's 2 sides of the range. There's one where they actually do the stationary running, shooting, qualification course, and then there's this other side of the range where you have the moving side-to-side targets. And that berm that would be built in the middle would separate those 2 sides so that simultaneously those can be used for training. And then again, we're looking at 13 vehicles for police between marked and unmarked cars, using the same criteria, high mileage, high maintenance cost, replacing those. And this 24 is when that aerial ladder truck will probably incur that expense. We'll have to order it in 24, likely getting it, Chief, 25, 26?
Order in 23.
23, that's right, thank you.
25.
And then again, another heart monitor and some extrication stabilization equipment. And then at the bottom, we've got a narcotics vehicle that will need replaced using seizure funds for that.
What is building improvement replacement?
Thank you for bringing that out. Every year, you think about the older fire stations that have been around for a while, it's things like replacing cabinetry, replacing flooring, repainting, resurfacing, countertops, that sort of thing. Every year, Chief Langford does a really good job of doing that gradually so we don't have one big, huge expense, and that's just more of that every year.
Ping pong tables.
All right, so we had 2 departmental presentations slated. It is 6 o'clock, so we can bump those to Wednesday. It's judicial and economic development, but we can bump those to Wednesday, or you guys can go, Philip swears he's gonna be only 10 minutes, but it's up to y'all.
Y'all want to do?
I'm okay either way, it's your time.
Do we expect more people to be on Wednesday?
More,
Council members?
I didn't know until today,
Alright.
yeah, a few things that's a good question.
Let's just wait.
I'm okay with waiting, I just,
Let's just wait.
so, real quick, Steve, just bring up the schedule for, it's the other PowerPoint, just show you real quick what we're gonna be doing. I'm happy to flip this schedule. I wanna remind you, based on, there you go, based on just feedback I've had, you did the one biennial during the height of COVID when we were only in Zoom. Our departments are not going over their budgets, they're going over some metrics for you to talk about what are you spending money on, where are the public dollars going, what levels of service are we providing. That's what they're going to be presenting to you, and I think it gives you a great overview of what they're doing or have been doing. That's all we've got, and the most important thing is if you have questions or want to have discussion, that we accomplish that on Wednesday as well. And I can flip that. I know Councilwoman Whitten had let me know that she's got to go pretty close to 2 hours into it. So if there's some discussions you want to have it and had some thoughts on the capital projects we presented or whatever, it might be good if we flip some of that discussion to when I have the majority of you here, and I'll check. I thought Connie's going to be here all the time, and I don't know. I hadn't heard from Councilperson Nixon.
Is there a possibility for us to, on the 21st, the committee of the whole, to start maybe 30 minutes earlier to have additional time to digest this information and for questioning?
Do we have anything else on the committee at all?
No, the only thing I don't recall is boards or commission, but that wouldn't take
Well, we
very
do
long.
have the Ward 4.
And you do have Ward 4, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to start it at whatever time you wish.
So your suggestion, Beth, is we use that time as a time to ask questions?
That way we can share.
Just know we'll have an ordinance on there drafted a certain way. And remember, the ordinance is only 3 or 4 pages. It's, you know, it is the aggregate of many things together, and that is expected to be not given unanimous consent. So, and that can be adjusted. While we have not historically done that between meetings, other than minor tweaks, we can if we need to. So that just gives you an overview of where we're headed. And again, this is just to give you some metrics. I want to give you information about what we've been doing. It's not really about their budgets. That's all in your books. And I am available to any of you for any questions, one-on-one meetings, whichever you want to do. And I can also bring the finance director and our budget manager with me to make sure we're answering your questions. So just reach out individually. I'm happy to do that. Okay, we'll post everything on the website, the video and everything. It'll be in the morning. All of it will be up in the morning, available to everyone, what we presented today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.